The story opens on a morning that should have been quiet. Sunlight poured through the grand windows of the Caldwell mansion, slipping over marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Yet the stillness broke under the sound of chaos. 3 small boys waging a private war inside their late mother's living room. Paint streaked the white walls like defiant flags. Cushions burst in clouds of feathers that drifted through the air like a snowfall no one had asked for. A vase toppled, shattering against the edge of the rug. Amid the wreckage stood Naomi Ellis, the new nanny, the 18th one, though she hadn't been told that yet. She clutched her small leather bag like armor and tried not to flinch when a toy truck skidded across the floor and hit her shoe. "You can't make us like you," shouted the oldest boy, Cal, with a fury that didn't belong in a 6-year-old's voice. His brothers, Noah and Liam, stood behind him like tiny soldiers guarding invisible grief. "We don't want another nanny. We want our mama." Naomi didn't answer at first. Her heartbeat drummed loud in her ears, but her eyes were calm. She looked around the room, not at the mess, but at the small faces flushed with anger and pain. Most people would have seen wildness. She saw something else. 3 children terrified that if they stopped fighting, the world might forget the woman they had lost. The eldest, Cal, threw another toy, just to test her. It hit the wall behind her and bounced harmlessly to the floor. Naomi stepped forward carefully, her voice low and steady. "You miss her every second, don't you?" The room fell still. The boys stared at her as if she had spoken a secret they weren't supposed to tell anyone. No nanny had ever started this way. "I'm not here to replace her," Naomi said, walking slowly through the feathers and paint. "I'm here because I know what it feels like when your world breaks and you don't know how to fix it." Noah blinked. "You don't know anything about us." "You're right," Naomi said softly. "Not yet. But I know that sometimes being angry is just another way of saying you're scared." The defiance in Cal's eyes flickered, replaced by confusion. He had learned how to fight grown-ups who shouted back, not ones who listened. Naomi knelt to the floor until her eyes were level with theirs. "You can try to scare me away if you want. You can shout or make a mess or even tell me you hate me, but I'm not going anywhere." The smallest boy, Liam, whispered, "They all say that." Naomi's smile was gentle, touched with sadness. "Maybe, but I've learned that staying doesn't always mean standing still. Sometimes it means standing up when it's hard." From the doorway behind them came a voice that froze the air. "What in heaven's name happened here?" The 3 boys stiffened as Ethan Caldwell, their father, appeared in the hall. He wore an expensive suit that looked like it belonged to someone who hadn't slept in days. The calm mask of a billionaire cracked at the sight of paint splattered on family portraits, feathers tangled in chandeliers, and his sons, barefoot and furious, in the center of it all. For a moment, Ethan didn't notice Naomi. His voice thundered through the room. "Boys, what have you done?" Cal tried to speak, but his chin trembled. Noah backed away, clutching Liam's arm. Naomi stood up slowly, stepping between them with quiet resolve. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone respectful but firm, "it's just a room. Walls can be cleaned. Hearts take longer." Ethan blinked, surprised by her composure. He had expected another panicked employee begging to quit. Instead, this woman met his gaze without fear. "And who might you be?" he asked. "Naomi Ellis," she said, "the nanny you hired yesterday." The boy's eyes widened. They hadn't realized she was the new one yet. Ethan exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. I warned the agency I needed someone who could handle. I know, Naomi interrupted gently. 17 didn't make it. Let's see if 18's lucky. Something in her tone disarmed him, a trace of humor under layers of exhaustion. Ethan glanced again at the paint, the feathers, the broken vase, and the children shrinking behind her. I suppose we should clean this up, he said quietly. Naomi nodded. Yes, but they'll help. All three boys looked horrified. Will what? Cal asked. You made the storm, Naomi said, so you get to build the calm. There was no anger in her voice, no threat, just a simple invitation to responsibility. Cal opened his mouth to protest, but Noah nudged him. Maybe she's serious, he whispered. Ethan stood aside as Naomi handed each boy a damp cloth. To his astonishment, they obeyed. Slowly, reluctantly, they began wiping paint from the floor and picking up feathers. Naomi joined them, humming under her breath. The melody was soft, something unfamiliar yet soothing, and after a while even the boys began to match her rhythm. Ethan found himself watching more than helping. For the first time in months, his sons weren't screaming. The sound of their small voices filled the room not with anger, but something close to peace. When the last bit of paint was gone, Naomi sat back on her heels. There, she said, a masterpiece of teamwork. Cal eyed her suspiciously. You're not going to tell Dad to punish us? Naomi looked at Ethan. Do you think they need punishment or understanding? Ethan hesitated. It was a question no one had asked him since his wife died. I think, he said slowly, they need both. Then maybe, Naomi replied, we can teach each other how. The boys exchanged glances. They didn't trust her yet, but they didn't hate her either. And for Naomi, that was enough for the first day. Later, when silence finally returned, she stood by the tall windows, looking out at the endless California skyline. Ethan joined her, hands in pockets. You handled that better than most generals handle a war, he said quietly. Naomi smiled. Wars end when someone decides not to fight back. Ethan studied her profile, the calm, the steadiness. For the first time since Grace's funeral, he felt a flicker of something almost forgotten. Hope. In another part of the house, the boys whispered to each other before sleep. She didn't yell, Liam murmured. Not even once. Maybe she's not staying long enough to bother, Cal replied. But Noah, the quietest, shook his head. She said she'd stay whether we're good or bad. And somewhere down the hall, Naomi smiled faintly to herself. She had heard every word. The narrator's voice folds around the closing image like a gentle sigh. Sometimes the first sign of healing isn't silence. It's the sound of someone choosing not to run away. Morning light moved across the 45th floor of Caldwell Industries like a slow tide of glass and gold. The city stretched below, quiet from this height, as though grief itself could be kept at a distance if one built walls tall enough. But inside the corner office, Ethan Caldwell was losing another private battle. The phone on his desk rang for the third time that morning. He already knew what waited on the other end, either his assistant with another nanny crisis or the headmaster with another school report. He pressed the button and leaned back in his chair. Yes, Maya. The voice of Maya Turner, calm and professional as always, came through the speaker. I'm afraid I have bad news, and worse news. Ethan rubbed his temples. Start with the bad. The school called. The boys started a food fight in the cafeteria. Then they locked their teacher in the supply closet and refused to come out of the playground tunnel. Ethan closed his eyes. And the worst news. Nanny number 17 quit an hour ago. She said, and I quote, "Those children are possessed by demons, and no amount of money is worth my sanity." Ethan's breath caught between a sigh and a broken laugh. He turned in his chair, looking out at the skyline. Each tower glittered like a promise, all the promises he'd kept to everyone but his family. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll call the agency." "I already did," Maya said. "They've run out of candidates. Apparently word travels faster than pay raises." He didn't answer. His reflection in the window looked like someone he used to know. Sharp suit, steady jaw, tired eyes. 6 months ago, this same office had been full of laughter. His wife Grace used to call at lunch, her voice filling the silence, reminding him to eat, to breathe, to come home early if he could. Then one morning she didn't call. She'd been driving across town to pick up a surprise birthday gift for him. The police said the accident was instant. Now every time the phone rang, he heard the echo of the call that ended his world. He turned away from the window and focused on the only thing he still knew how to control: work. The tablet on his desk glowed with numbers. Profits rising, stock stable, investors pleased. The empire was flawless. The man behind it was falling apart. Maya stepped into the office with a folder. "Sir, if I may." "Not now." His tone was sharper than he meant. She froze, then placed the folder on the edge of his desk. "It's the latest press brief. A journalist from the Morning Ledger is writing about the family's difficulties." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're children, not headlines." "I know, but the public sees things differently." Maya hesitated before continuing. "They're saying the Caldwells have everything but control." He wanted to shout that control meant nothing when you'd lost the person who kept you human. Instead, he said, softly, "Thank you, Maya. I'll handle it." After she left, Ethan opened his laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty job listing page, a small box waiting to be filled by desperation. He typed the words slowly. "Experienced caregiver needed for 3 energetic boys. Must be patient, reliable, and willing to work under high-pressure circumstances. Competitive salary for the right candidate." He paused before hitting post. Energetic was a lie. High pressure was an understatement. Still, he pressed enter. Somewhere out there, someone might be foolish enough to try. That night, in another part of the city, Naomi Ellis sat in her small apartment listening to rain tapping against the window like a quiet metronome. She scrolled through endless job listings, families wanting someone young, polished, trained in child psychology. She had none of those certificates. What she had were scars that didn't show and a voice that had learned how to stay calm in the middle of storms. Her eyes paused on the Caldwell ad. The phrasing caught her attention. "Previous caregivers have found the position challenging." She smiled faintly. That was polite code for, "Our home is a battlefield." She almost scrolled past it. After 8 years of nanny work, she had promised herself she wouldn't take another job that broke her heart. But curiosity pulled her back. She typed the name into a search bar. The screen filled with headlines. Tech billionaire loses wife in tragic accident. Caldwell triplets drive away yet another nanny. A photo showed 3 small boys in matching suits standing beside their father at the funeral. The eldest's face, Cal, she guessed, was twisted in anger, not tears. Naomi rested a hand on her chest. The ache there was familiar. She remembered being 7, standing in a police station after the fire that took her parents. She remembered the way people looked at her, pity mixed with impatience, as though grief were something a child should get over quickly. She had learned early that anger was easier than sadness. She whispered to the picture on the screen, "You're not bad kids. You're just lost." Her cursor hovered over the apply button. She hesitated, then clicked. While the city slept, Ethan's phone buzzed on his nightstand. The notification glowed softly in the dark. One new application received. He didn't check it. He didn't believe anyone would last. Morning came again too quickly. Ethan stood in the marble foyer of his mansion, coffee untouched, the echo of children's footsteps upstairs like a drumbeat of chaos waiting to start. Maya arrived, tablet in hand. 5 interviews scheduled today. You'll want to cancel your board meeting. Let's get it over with, he muttered. By mid-morning, 3 candidates had already failed. One believed in military discipline. Another thought the boys needed art therapy. The third lasted 15 minutes before asking for a security escort. Ethan had begun to think the problem wasn't the nannies, it was him. Then the doorbell rang again. When Naomi stepped into the light of the entryway, she looked nothing like the others. Her dress was plain but pressed, her eyes steady. She didn't stare at the gold chandeliers or the family crest engraved above the stairs. She looked instead at the photographs along the hallway. Pictures of Grace holding the boys, her laughter frozen behind glass. Ethan watched her pause at one frame. She was beautiful, Naomi said quietly. She was everything, he replied, before he could stop himself. They sat across from each other in the study. He asked the usual questions: experience, references, salary expectations. Her answers were brief, honest, and not rehearsed. Then she leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Caldwell, I don't have a degree in child development, but I understand loss. When my parents died, I was passed from home to home. The hardest part wasn't missing them. It was thinking no one wanted to stay." Ethan felt something in his chest loosen. She continued, "Your sons aren't impossible. They're grieving. And grief, especially in children, looks a lot like anger because it's the only language they have left." He sat back, studying her. "And you think you can help?" "I can try," she said simply. "Not by controlling them, but by understanding them. That's the only thing that ever helped me." For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself a fragile kind of hope. "When can you start?" Naomi smiled. "Tomorrow morning." As she left, the camera of the imagination follows her down the long driveway, rain clouds parting just enough for sunlight to catch on the silver badge of her bus pass. She whispered to herself, "18's my lucky number." Inside the house, Ethan turned toward the staircase, hearing laughter upstairs already beginning again, wild, sharp, and painfully alive. He didn't know that by the next evening, the sound of that laughter would start to change. And somewhere in the city, Naomi folded her worn resume into a drawer and whispered a small prayer. Not for an easy job, but for the strength to stay when it wasn't. The narrator's voice settles over the closing beat like a low hum. Sometimes, the people who heal us aren't the ones with perfect answers. They're the ones who remember what it felt like to need them. The following morning rose over the Caldwell estate like light through water. Bright, clean, and unaware of how fragile the peace below really was. Ethan stood in the hallway straightening his tie, already exhausted, though the day had barely begun. The house was too quiet. He had come to dread silence. It was never a sign of calm. It was only the pause before another storm. In the kitchen, the cook Clara Nguyen was brewing coffee while the butler, Mr. Davis, prepared for the new arrival. Clara shook her head as she wiped the counter. 17 gone, she muttered. How long you think this one lasts? Mr. Davis didn't look up. Long enough to understand she won't. At exactly 9 o'clock, the front doorbell chimed, a sound so polite it felt like a trick. Ethan checked his watch, then motioned for Maya Turner to let the applicant in. She opened the door, and there she was, Naomi Ellis, standing on the threshold with a small leather tote and the steady poise of someone who had learned to carry her entire life in one bag. Mr. Caldwell? She asked softly. Her voice didn't tremble. That alone set her apart. Ethan nodded. Ms. Ellis, thank you for coming. He expected her to glance around, to marvel at the glass staircase or the chandelier like every other candidate before her. Instead, her gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the entryway table. Grace's smile lit the picture, the triplets clinging to her arms. Naomi's expression changed, respectful, not pitying. She reached out and adjusted the frame so it stood straighter. She had kind eyes, she said. Ethan swallowed. She did. He gestured toward the study. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, softening the edges of the dark wood furniture. The faint scent of Grace's favorite lilac candle still lingered, though no one had dared light it since she passed. Naomi took the seat he offered, hands folded loosely in her lap. Ethan cleared his throat. Before we begin, you should know what you're walking into. My sons have difficulties adjusting. I read the reports, she said, and I read between the lines. He raised an eyebrow. Between the lines? Energetic, spirited, a challenge. Those are words people use when they're afraid to say, hurt. For a moment, Ethan forgot his prepared list of questions. Her tone wasn't bold or rehearsed. It was quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't need to defend itself. You sound like someone who's met that kind of hurt before, he said. Naomi nodded. I have. She hesitated for a breath. My parents died when I was 7. After that, I lived in homes that didn't know how to talk about pain. They used rules instead. But grief doesn't obey rules. It just waits for someone to understand it. Ethan leaned forward slightly. And you think you can help my boys? I think they don't need fixing, Naomi said. They need someone who won't run when it gets loud. It wasn't the answer of a professional reciting a philosophy. It was a confession. Something inside Ethan shifted, a small ache opening into relief. He glanced at Maya, who stood quietly by the door. The assistant's expression said she'd heard every kind of nanny speech imaginable, but even she seemed momentarily disarmed. Ethan tried to return to the structure of the interview. Do you have formal training, certifications, first aid, crisis management? First aid, yes, Naomi replied. Crisis management, mostly learned by surviving one. A flicker of a smile crossed his face before he caught it. This household isn't easy, he warned. The boys have driven away every professional I've hired. Naomi's tone remained light but firm. That tells me they're consistent. Consistency means reliability. That's something to work with. Ethan couldn't help but laugh softly, the sound surprising both of them. You speak about them like a scientist studying weather patterns. Children are like weather, she said. They don't choose their storms. You just learn when to open an umbrella and when to dance in the rain. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was contemplative, the kind that happens when two people recognize a truth they've both avoided saying aloud. He asked one final question, his voice quieter now. Why us? You could choose any other family, one less complicated. Naomi looked directly at him. Because complication is where love hides when it's scared, and because I've learned that children who test your patience are the ones who need your presence the most. Ethan didn't respond right away. He studied her expression, the calm beneath her words, the steady eyes that didn't dart around for approval. Something about her reminded him of Grace, not in appearance, but in the way she seemed to fill the room with peace without trying to. "When can you start?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," she said, smiling faintly. "If you still want me after I meet them." "Oh, you'll want to meet them," Maya muttered, not unkindly. Ethan rose and extended his hand. "Welcome to the battlefield." Naomi shook his hand, her grip firm, grounded. "Then let's call it a garden that forgot how to grow," she replied. He watched her leave through the glass doors that opened onto the circular driveway. For a long time after she disappeared into the sunlight, he remained there, thinking about what she'd said. Upstairs, faint laughter and the clatter of toys echoed through the halls. It sounded like trouble. It also sounded alive. Later that afternoon, Maya returned with a clipboard. "I still think she's too calm," she said. "Calm breaks faster than steel in this house." Ethan shook his head. Maybe calm is exactly what this house needs. As he spoke, Naomi's bus crossed the bridge into the city. She watched the skyline recede in the rearview mirror, the mansion already a pale memory surrounded by green hills. Her reflection in the window looked older than she felt, but there was determination in her eyes. She whispered, almost like a prayer, "They won't scare me away." The bus hissed to a stop near her apartment. A drizzle had started, fine and silver, the kind that softened even the hardest corners of the street. She pulled her coat tighter and stepped into the light rain. For a moment she thought of Grace's photograph, the warmth in that woman's smile, and felt a connection she couldn't explain. When she reached her door, she paused to pick up a letter that had been slipped beneath the mat. A bill, another reminder of how much she needed this job. But instead of feeling dread, she felt something like courage. Tomorrow would be the real test. Back at the mansion, Ethan stood at the window of his study, watching the lights of the city begin to glitter in the distance. He wondered, not for the first time, what Grace would have thought of him now. He imagined her gentle laughter and heard her say, "Stop fixing everything, Ethan. Just listen." He whispered to the empty room, "I'm trying." The narrator's voice settles into the space between their two worlds, the woman on the bus and the man by the window. Two people, each holding the broken pieces of a different life, moving toward the same house. Sometimes fate doesn't arrive with thunder. It knocks softly and waits to be invited in. The next morning began with sunlight crawling shyly across the marble floors of the Caldwell kitchen. For a few peaceful seconds, the house held its breath. Then came the sound of feet, many small, determined feet, racing down the hallway like thunder disguised as laughter. Naomi Ellis had arrived half an hour earlier. Clara Nguyen had handed her a cup of coffee with a kind of grim sympathy, as though giving a soldier her last meal before battle. "They're unpredictable," Clara warned. "Sometimes quiet. That's when you should worry." Naomi smiled. "I've met quiet storms before." The calm didn't last. A crash echoed from the dining area, followed by a squeal of triumph. Naomi walked toward the noise, setting down her bag. The kitchen looked like a sugar hurricane had passed through. Syrup glistened on the countertops. Pancakes lay scattered like fallen shields, and 3 small boys stood in the middle of it all, armed with spoons dripping in gold. "Food fight!" shouted Cal, the oldest, flinging a blob of pancake toward his brother. Noah ducked, and the pancake hit the wall with a soft slap. Liam shrieked with laughter, raising a bowl of whipped cream like a trophy. Naomi paused in the doorway, surveying the scene. Clara gasped behind her. "You should stop them before—" Naomi raised a hand gently. "No, let's see what art they're creating." She stepped inside, calm as a sunrise. "Wow," she said, her tone almost impressed. "You boys are really good at making messes. The colors, the patterns. This looks like modern art. I'd call it chaos at breakfast." The three boys froze, unsure how to react. Every other adult had shouted within seconds. Cal frowned, unsure whether she was joking. "You're not going to yell?" Naomi picked up a piece of pancake from the floor, inspected it like a museum critic, and smiled. "Why would I yell? You're clearly talented artists. But tell me, are we painting or eating today?" Noah giggled despite himself. "We were painting. With syrup," added Liam proudly, his face sticky and glowing. Naomi crouched down until her eyes met theirs. "You know what I like about art?" she said softly. "When you're done, you clean the brushes." The boys blinked, caught between confusion and curiosity. "So," she continued, standing up, "let's clean our brushes." She grabbed a few wet cloths, passing one to each boy as if they were part of a secret mission. Without raising her voice or commanding, she began wiping the table. After a moment's hesitation, Noah followed. Then Liam. Finally, Cal sighed, rolling his eyes in defeat, but joining in. Ethan Caldwell appeared in the doorway midway through the cleanup, his tie slightly loosened and his expression unreadable. He had expected to find another nanny in tears, not this calm choreography of soap and small voices. "What happened here?" he asked. Naomi straightened, smiling faintly. "Breakfast happened, Mr. Caldwell. It got enthusiastic." Ethan looked from the syrup to his sons, then back to her. "And you're not quitting?" "Not yet. I was told this was a lively household." Liam looked up at her from under syrup-smeared hair. "Are you mad at us?" Naomi crouched again, wiping a streak of chocolate from his cheek. "Mad? No, but I am curious. Did you get full from the syrup before you remembered the pancakes?" The question was gentle, teasing. Liam laughed so hard he nearly fell over. Cal tried to hide a smile behind his hand. Ethan, caught off guard by the sound of his sons laughing without cruelty, leaned against the counter and watched. After the last of the syrup was wiped away, Naomi gathered them around the table. "All right, artists, I brought something for you." She pulled a paper bag from her tote and set it on the table. The smell of warm cookies drifted out. "Oatmeal and honey. They're not perfect circles, but neither are we." The boys exchanged cautious glances. Cal narrowed his eyes. "Is this a trick?" "No trick," Naomi said. "You helped clean. That earns cookies in my world." They hesitated only a second longer before diving in. Liam's hands were so sticky that the cookie nearly glued itself to his fingers. Naomi laughed softly. "You've invented syrup-proof snacks." Ethan folded his arms, trying not to smile. "They seem to like you." Naomi shrugged. "Children always test the door first. They need to know it's locked from the inside, that you won't run." Ethan studied her for a moment. "You've been through something, haven't you?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Haven't we all?" Before he could answer, Cal tugged at her sleeve. "If you're not mad, why did all the other nannies leave?" Naomi leaned down until she was eye level with him again. Because sometimes grown-ups forget that love isn't about control. It's about patience. That doesn't leave when you make a mess. Cal considered that, chewing slowly. You talk weird. Naomi laughed. That's what happens when you grow up with too many books and not enough people. For the first time, Cal's face softened. Do you have any brothers? No, she said. But I've always wanted 3. Noah grinned. You can borrow us. Ethan turned away quickly so they wouldn't see his eyes misting. It was the first real conversation he had heard between his children and another adult since Grace died. After breakfast, Naomi helped them wash their hands and guided them toward the playroom. The walls there were covered in crayon drawings, most of them jagged storms of color. These are amazing, she said. You can feel the energy. Cal pointed at one picture of a small figure with a dark scribble above it. That's Mom, he whispered. She's in the clouds. Naomi touched the corner of the paper lightly. She'd be proud of your drawing. Maybe we can make a new one of her smiling next time. Ethan lingered at the door, his heart caught somewhere between gratitude and guilt. As the morning turned to afternoon, Clara peeked into the playroom expecting noise and disaster. Instead, she found Naomi reading aloud, her voice low and even. The triplets lay sprawled on the carpet, half listening, half dozing. Clara whispered to Ethan, "She's got magic." Ethan shook his head slowly. No, just patience. When Naomi closed the book, she looked down at the 3 small bodies finally at rest. She whispered to herself, "First day's storm survived." That evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Naomi stepped out onto the balcony. The sunset draped the sky in gold and violet. Ethan joined her, 2 cups of tea in hand. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not walking out." Naomi smiled. "They remind me of myself. I used to think if I was loud enough, maybe someone would stay." He looked at her, unsure what to say. "Did anyone?" "Eventually," she said. "But not soon enough." The air between them was warm, calm, the kind of silence that carried meaning instead of distance. Inside, the boys stirred in their sleep, mumbling half-formed dreams. Somewhere in those dreams, laughter lingered, sweet, unguarded, and new. The narrator's voice settles softly over the last light of the day. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. It arrives in small things. A cookie shared, a mess forgiven, a morning that ends with laughter instead of shouting. The second morning began quietly enough to make Naomi Ellis suspicious. Sunlight spread through the mansion's wide corridors, sliding across the framed photographs that still told a story of a family trying to remember itself. From the kitchen came the soft sound of Clara Nguyen humming as she cooked, the smell of toast and cinnamon drifting through the air. Somewhere upstairs, one of the triplets laughed, a small sound, light and unguarded. Naomi smiled as she tied her apron. "Peace before mischief," she whispered, "a rare species." By the time she reached the playroom, the boys were already awake. Cal sat in the corner building a tower out of toy blocks, his brows furrowed in concentration. Noah was sprawled on his stomach coloring, his crayons scattered in a rainbow across the floor. Liam sat nearby, humming to himself while trying to fit puzzle pieces together that clearly didn't belong. They looked up when Naomi entered, each with a different reaction. Cal wary, Noah curious, Liam beaming. "You came back," Liam said first, his smile a burst of sunshine. "I said I would," Naomi replied, setting her bag down. Cal eyed her carefully. "Most don't." Naomi walked over to him, crouching so she was at his level. "Well," she said softly, Most people don't know that leaving can hurt more than staying. Cal didn't answer. He went back to stacking his blocks, though his hands trembled slightly. Naomi didn't press. She sat cross-legged on the rug beside them, quietly helping Noah find the right shade of blue for his drawing. After a while, Cal's tower began to lean dangerously. Liam reached out, curious, and the whole structure collapsed with a soft clatter. Cal's face darkened. "I told you not to touch it!" he shouted, shoving Liam's hand away. Naomi's voice remained calm. "It's hard when something you built falls apart, isn't it?" "It's ruined!" Cal yelled. She nodded. "Yes, and it's okay to be angry about that." Her words took him by surprise. He had expected punishment or lecture, not permission to feel. The anger in his face cracked, confusion slipping through. "You're not mad?" "I'm not," she said. "You cared enough to build it. That matters more than the mess." Cal blinked at her, unsure what to do with this unexpected grace. Then, slowly, he began picking up the fallen pieces. Naomi helped him without a word. Noah watched them quietly. "Miss Naomi," he said, "if we're bad, will you leave?" Naomi paused. The question hung in the air like something fragile and old, a thought these children had carried too long. She set down the block in her hand and looked at all three of them. "No," she said simply. "I'll stay whether you're good or bad." "Even if we break stuff?" Liam asked. "Even then." "Even if we yell?" Noah whispered. "Even if you yell." Cal frowned. "Why?" "Because someone once left when I needed them most," Naomi said quietly. "And I promised myself I'd never be that person for anyone else." The boys didn't move. The house seemed to listen with them. Then Liam crawled closer, pressing his small hand against her knee. "I'm glad you're here." Naomi smiled. "So am I." Later that morning, Ethan passed by the playroom on his way to the office. He stopped at the doorway, unnoticed, and watched. The woman he'd hired barely 24 hours ago was sitting on the floor surrounded by crayons and blocks. 3 small heads bowed around her like a constellation rediscovering its orbit. Cal was explaining how his tower had fallen, Naomi listening intently as though it were a serious architectural tragedy. When Liam started to giggle, she joined in without hesitation. The laughter was small, but real. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, letting himself breathe. For months, every sound in the house had been sharp. Glass breaking, doors slamming, cries muffled by walls. Now, for the first time, the noise felt alive, not painful. Naomi noticed him then. She smiled politely. "Mr. Caldwell, would you like to join us?" He shook his head quickly. "I'd only ruin the engineering project." "Then maybe you can help us with morale," she teased. He chuckled, surprising himself. "You seem to have that covered." When she looked at him, there was no fear, no deference, just quiet understanding. It unsettled him in a good way. "Lunch will be ready in an hour," she said. "We're making sandwiches shaped like dinosaurs." "Dinosaurs?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "It's about making meals memorable," Naomi replied. "They eat better when they smile first." He nodded, impressed despite himself. "Carry on then." As he walked down the hall, Maya intercepted him with her usual precision. "Sir, you're due at the investor call in 20 minutes. Should I prepare your talking points?" Ethan hesitated. "Later. I'll take the call from here today." Maya blinked. "You never work from home." "Maybe it's time to start," he said, glancing back toward the sound of laughter behind him. That afternoon, Naomi gathered the boys for nap time. None of them wanted to sleep. She told them about the game she used to play as a child, how you could lie still, close your eyes, and pretend you were floating on a cloud, safe and weightless. Liam was the first to drift off, clutching a stuffed bear that had lost one ear. Noah followed soon after. Cal stayed awake the longest, watching Naomi carefully. "You really mean it, don't you? That you'll stay?" "I do," she said. "You can test me if you need to." He studied her face, looking for cracks, for insincerity. He found none. "If you stay," he said softly, "I'll try not to be bad all the time." Naomi brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You can be human. That's enough." When he finally fell asleep, she sat beside them for a long time, listening to their breathing. It reminded her of her own childhood, of nights in foster homes where silence meant safety and footsteps meant fear. She had promised herself back then that if she ever got the chance, she would be the kind of adult she had needed. Now, in this quiet room filled with the soft rhythm of trust being rebuilt, she realized that promise was finally being kept. Ethan passed by again, stopping at the doorway once more. Naomi didn't notice him watching. He saw her sitting beside his sons, her head slightly bowed, a faint smile playing on her lips. Something in his chest loosened, the guilt, the exhaustion, the sense of failure that had followed him since Grace's death. He whispered to himself, maybe they still have a chance. Outside, the afternoon sunlight deepened, spilling over the garden where Grace's favorite roses were beginning to bloom again after months of neglect. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and earth. The narrator's voice drifts through the moment like a calm tide. Sometimes a family doesn't need a miracle. It just needs someone who stays long enough for the laughter to return. Healing doesn't happen in hours. It grows slowly, like light finding its way through closed curtains. By the end of Naomi's first week, the mansion had started to sound different. The echoes that once carried anger and shouting now carried the small, uneven sounds of life returning. Children's laughter, dishes clinking, footsteps that didn't stomp but wandered. Still, peace in the Caldwell house was fragile, like glass that had been mended but not yet tested. Naomi woke early that Saturday morning, long before the boys stirred. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the corridors shimmered in a pale gray light. She walked quietly to the kitchen, brewed herself a small cup of tea, and stood by the window. The garden outside was wrapped in mist, the roses just beginning to open. Clara entered, tying her apron. "You're up early," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep," Naomi admitted. "Days like this make me think something big is about to happen." Clara smiled knowingly. In this house, something big always happens. By 8 o'clock, the mansion was alive again. Ethan sat in his office with his laptop open but unread. He could hear Naomi's calm voice from down the hall, reading a story to the boys. It wasn't loud, but every word reached him, soft and sure. He found himself listening without meaning to, the way one listens to a song they didn't know they missed. He hadn't realized how long it had been since there was a gentle voice in the house. Grace used to read to the boys every Saturday morning, her voice bright and warm, her laughter threading through the air. Now, hearing Naomi, Ethan felt something close to memory, but not quite sorrow. It was quieter, more present. By mid-morning, Naomi decided to take the boys outside. The air was cool and clear, the grass damp beneath their shoes. She had planned a small gardening activity, inspired by the roses that Grace had once loved. "Each of you gets one pot," she told them, kneeling on the ground. "And one seed. Your job is to keep it alive." Liam looked doubtful. "What kind of seed?" "Sunflower," she said. Big, strong, a little stubborn, like you. 3. The boys grinned. Cal rolled his eyes but took his pot anyway. What happens if it doesn't grow? Then we learn what it needed, Naomi said. And we try again. They spent the next hour digging, watering, and making a spectacular mess of soil and water. Naomi didn't mind. Mud washed off. Trust didn't. Afterward, while Clara prepared lunch, Naomi left the boys in the playroom with a movie and went to fetch fresh towels. When she returned, something felt off. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the triplets were huddled together, whispering. The moment they saw her, Cal jumped up too quickly, knocking over a box of crayons. "We didn't do anything?" he blurted out. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That's usually what people say right before I find out they did." Noah bit his lip. Liam hid behind a cushion, trying to look invisible. Naomi stepped closer and noticed her phone missing from the side table. She crouched down, voice calm. "Did any of you see my phone?" Silence. "Cal?" He met her gaze but didn't answer. Naomi waited. Patience, she reminded herself, was stronger than scolding. "It's okay if you borrowed it," she said gently. "I just need to know where it is." Still nothing. Finally, Liam whispered, "Cal wanted to see if you'd get mad." Naomi nodded slowly. "A test, then." Cal's chin lifted in defiance. "You said you'd stay no matter what. But everyone gets mad about something. We just want to know what makes you mad." The honesty of it stopped her cold. There it was, the truth behind their chaos, the engine of all their mischief. They weren't trying to drive her away. They were trying to find the edge of her patience, the moment her love would run out. Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor. "You know," she said quietly, "when I was little, I used to test people too. I'd break things, hide things, say things I didn't mean. I just wanted to know how much it would take before they stopped caring." Cal frowned. "Did they stop?" "Most did," she admitted. "But a few didn't. And that's how I learned what love feels like." The boys watched her closely. She could see their defenses wobbling, uncertainty flickering behind their stubbornness. "So," she said, folding her hands in her lap, "here's what we'll do. You tell me where my phone is, and I'll tell you what makes me mad. Fair trade?" Cal hesitated, then pointed toward the toy box. Naomi reached inside and found her phone wrapped carefully in a sock, hidden among plastic dinosaurs. She smiled. "At least you took care of it." Cal squirmed. "So, what makes you mad?" "Cruelty," Naomi said softly. "When someone hurts another person on purpose, or when they make someone small feel smaller." She looked at each of them in turn. "But mistakes, curiosity, testing, those don't make me mad. They just mean you're human." Liam crept closer, resting his head on her shoulder. "You didn't yell?" "Yelling's loud," she said. "Listening's louder." From the doorway, Ethan had been watching again, drawn by instinct more than intention. He had witnessed dozens of nannies lose control in this very room. Now, for the first time, he saw his sons learning not fear, but reflection. When Naomi turned, she caught him standing there. "They're testing the fences," she said quietly. He nodded. "And you're not fixing them." "Sometimes you don't fix fences," she replied. "You open a gate." Ethan smiled faintly, recognizing the wisdom behind her calm. "You're good at this." Naomi shook her head. "I've just had practice being on both sides of the wall." Later that evening, after dinner, Cal slipped a folded note under Naomi's door. She found it before bed. In the shaky handwriting of a 6-year-old, it read, "I took your phone. I'm sorry." I just wanted to see if you'd stay. Thank you for not leaving." Naomi pressed the paper to her chest. The corners were already smudged with syrup fingerprints. She smiled, tears blurring the words. Upstairs, in his own room, Ethan sat at his desk reading the day's financial reports, though the numbers swam before his eyes. He couldn't stop thinking about what Naomi had said, about fences and gates, about patience louder than yelling. For the first time in months, he closed his laptop before midnight and walked through the quiet halls to check on his sons. They were asleep, the glow of their nightlight painting soft halos across their faces. On the floor beside them lay a new drawing. 3 boys, 1 woman, and a tall man standing together under a sun that took up half the page. Ethan picked it up, his throat tightening. On the bottom corner, in careful block letters, it read, "Us." The narrator's voice settles into the hush of the house, slow and thoughtful. Trust doesn't arrive like lightning. It grows through quiet tests, small human moments where someone could have walked away and didn't. In that kind of patience, love finally learns it's safe. The next week brought a rhythm the Caldwell house hadn't known in a long time. Breakfast no longer felt like a battlefield. The boys ate their pancakes instead of launching them. Their laughter came more easily, as though they had begun to trust that joy would not be punished for being loud. Yet, beneath that fragile calm, one person still lived in silence: their father. Every morning, Ethan Caldwell left before the sun climbed above the garden walls. The boys would glance up at the sound of the front door closing, their faces flickering between indifference and disappointment. Naomi noticed, but she said nothing. She understood that grief had many disguises, and work was Ethan's favorite one. That Tuesday evening, the house glowed in the amber light of sunset. The boys were sprawled across the living room rug, building a tower taller than any they'd made before. Naomi sat nearby, pretending to read but really just watching them. Their cooperation, though clumsy, made her smile. Cal looked up suddenly. "Do you think Dad will come home before dinner?" Naomi closed her book. "Has he been late lately?" "Always," Noah muttered. "He says he's busy saving the company." Liam whispered, "Maybe he doesn't like being here anymore." The words were soft, but they landed heavy. Naomi set the book aside. "You know," she said carefully, "sometimes grown-ups don't stay away because they want to. Sometimes they're scared they'll say or do the wrong thing. It doesn't mean they don't love you." Cal crossed his arms. "If he loved us, he'd be here." Naomi nodded. "That's one way of seeing it, but maybe love looks different when someone's trying to keep the world from falling apart. He might think he's protecting you by working so hard." Noah frowned. "That's dumb." "It is," Naomi said softly. "But grown-ups get it wrong sometimes, too." She didn't try to convince them further. Instead, she suggested something that might bridge the distance. "How about we make him a surprise?" "What kind of surprise?" Liam asked, eyes brightening. "A good-night message," Naomi said. "You can tell him one thing you like about him, or one thing you want to do together. We'll record it so he can hear it when he's driving home." The boys exchanged skeptical glances, but curiosity won. Within minutes, they were crowded around her phone, whispering into the microphone. Cal went first. "Hi, Dad. I'm not mad at you anymore. Maybe a little, but we built the biggest tower today, and I think you'd like it." Noah followed. "Hi, Daddy. I drew a picture for you. It's us in the park like before. I hope you remember that day." Liam finished with a giggle. "Hi, Daddy. Please come home soon. We saved you a cookie, but I might eat it if you're too slow." Naomi smiled. When they were done, she pressed send. Later that night, Ethan sat in his car outside the office building. Exhaustion wrapped around him like a second skin. The city lights blurred through the windshield. He scrolled through unread emails, stock reports, and contracts that promised everything except peace. Then he saw a message notification from Naomi. For a moment, he hesitated, afraid of what it might contain. He pressed play. Cal's small voice filled the car first, hesitant but brave. Then Noah's gentler tone. Finally, Liam's mischievous laugh. Ethan leaned back against the seat, one hand over his eyes. The sound of his son's voices cut through every wall he had built to keep grief contained. When the message ended, the silence felt louder than the city. He whispered, "I miss you too." The next morning, Naomi found him in the kitchen. He was there early, still in his suit, hair slightly disheveled. The boys were half asleep at the table, blinking in disbelief. "Dad?" Cal said, rubbing his eyes. "You're here." "I thought I'd make breakfast," Ethan said, awkwardly holding a spatula like a weapon he didn't know how to use, or at least try. Naomi watched as he attempted to flip a pancake. It landed on the counter instead of the pan. Liam burst out laughing. Ethan looked horrified for a second, then started laughing too. The sound startled everyone, deep, real, almost rusty from disuse. "I think you've got the spirit, Mr. Caldwell," Naomi said, rescuing the burnt pancake. "But maybe the art of breakfast requires a little practice." He handed her the spatula, sheepish. "Then I'm in good company." They ate together, imperfect pancakes and all. Naomi didn't speak much, just watched how the boys leaned closer to their father, inch by inch. When Ethan reached to wipe syrup from Liam's cheek, the little boy didn't flinch. After breakfast, Ethan walked Naomi to the hallway. "That message last night, thank you." "It was their idea," she said. "I know. But you made it happen." He paused. "I've been hiding at work. I told myself they were too young to understand, but really I didn't want to see what I'd broken." Naomi shook her head. "You didn't break them, Mr. Caldwell. They broke a little when life did. Your job isn't to fix the cracks. It's to fill them with love." He looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. Respect, maybe even hope. "Grace used to say things like that." "She sounds wise," Naomi said. "She was," he whispered. The afternoon passed gently. Ethan spent time in the garden with the boys, watching them tend to the small sunflower pots Naomi had helped them plant. Cal showed him how his had sprouted a single leaf. "She said it's stubborn," he told his father proudly. Ethan knelt beside him, touching the tiny green stem. "Then it must take after you." When the boys ran ahead, Ethan turned to Naomi. "You've done more for them in a week than I have in months." Naomi smiled. Maybe it just took someone new to remind them how much they already have. That evening, as the sky turned to soft violet, Ethan stood by the balcony overlooking the city. Naomi joined him, a light cardigan around her shoulders. The air carried the faint scent of the roses Grace had loved. "I keep wondering," he said, "if Grace would be proud of how I've handled things." "She'd be proud that you're still trying," Naomi said gently. "Grief isn't a thing to overcome. It's a room you learn to live in without closing the door." He turned toward her. "You talk like someone who's lived in that room a long time." "I redecorated," she said with a soft smile. "Made space for light." He laughed quietly, the sound blending with the hum of evening traffic far below. Inside, the boys' laughter drifted through the open door as they played. It was a different kind of noise, now less wild, more human. The narrator's voice came like a soft echo, full of reflection. Sometimes the hardest part of love is showing up, not perfectly, not with answers, but simply with presence. In the quiet return of a father and the steady patience of a woman who stayed, the house began to remember what warmth felt like. The night began peacefully enough. The boys had spent the day outside, running through the garden until the last of the sunlight slipped behind the hills. For the first time in a long while, Ethan had stayed home the entire day. He had helped with the sunflowers, burned another pancake at lunch, and even allowed Liam to fall asleep in his lap during a movie. When bedtime came, Naomi tucked them in as usual. Cal pretended he was too old for lullabies. Noah asked for an extra blanket even though it was warm, and Liam wanted her to promise she'd still be there in the morning. "I'm not going anywhere," she told him, brushing his hair back. "Good night, my brave explorers." The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of the nightlight. Naomi stood by the door for a moment before turning it halfway closed. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the oil she'd placed in the diffuser, a small trick she had learned from one of her foster homes, where calm had to be created on purpose. Down the hall, Ethan sat in his study, the light of his laptop flickering across his tired face. He was working, or at least pretending to. Every now and then, he caught himself listening for the boys, half expecting a scream, a fight, or a crash. But the house stayed still. Then, sometime past midnight, a sound cut through the silence, a low whimper that turned into a cry. Naomi was out of bed in seconds. She hurried to the boys' room, heart pounding, and found Liam tangled in his blanket, thrashing and crying out words that didn't make sense. His brothers stirred, frightened but unsure whether to wake him. Naomi sat beside him, speaking softly. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." He didn't wake right away. His hands clawed at the air, his voice breaking. "Don't go, Mama. Please don't go." Naomi felt her chest tighten. She'd seen nightmares before, but this was different. This was a wound remembering itself. She placed a hand lightly on his back and began to hum. The tune was simple, an old melody she had carried since childhood, one that had comforted her when no one else had. The sound filled the room like a small light. Slowly, Liam's breathing began to steady, his fists unclenched. When he finally opened his eyes, his cheeks were wet. He looked around in confusion, still caught between dream and waking. Naomi smiled gently. "You were dreaming, love, but you're here now. You're safe." He blinked up at her. "She was there," he whispered. "Mom, she was calling me." Naomi nodded. Maybe she was saying goodnight. The door creaked behind them. Ethan stood there, barefoot, his expression raw. He had heard the crying, then the humming. The song had frozen him where he stood because it was familiar, hauntingly so. "That song," he said quietly. Naomi turned, startled. "I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" He shook his head. "No, it's just... Grace used to hum that same tune when they were babies." For a moment, the room seemed to fold in on itself, past and present touching. Ethan crossed the threshold, kneeling beside Liam's bed. His hand trembled as he brushed his son's hair. "You're okay, buddy." Liam reached out sleepily, taking his father's hand. "Daddy, Mommy sang it too." Ethan swallowed hard. "I know she did." Naomi sat back, giving them space. The boy's breathing slowed, his small fingers still curled around Ethan's. Within minutes, Liam drifted back to sleep. The room was quiet again, except for the sound of rain beginning outside. a slow, steady rhythm against the window. Ethan stood, moving carefully so as not to wake him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being here, for knowing what to do." Naomi shook her head. Sometimes the body remembers what the heart tries to forget. All we can do is stay until it passes. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes dark but soft. Grace used to say that too, that staying was a kind of prayer. Naomi smiled faintly. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "She would have liked you," Ethan said quietly. "You remind me of her." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence. Naomi finally rose, pulling the blanket higher over Liam's shoulders. "Children don't stop missing their mothers," she said. "They just find new ways to keep her close." Ethan nodded. "Do you think I've made that harder for them?" "I think," she said gently, "you've been trying so hard to be strong that they forgot they're allowed to see you hurt." He didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the window, the reflection of the nightlight shimmering in the glass. "I thought I had to protect them from it," he said, "from seeing me break. Sometimes breaking in front of them teaches them they're not alone," Naomi said, "and that it's okay to feel." The words hung between them, quiet but heavy with truth. When Liam stirred again, Ethan reached down instinctively, resting a hand on his son's back. Naomi watched, her expression tender. "He'll sleep now," she said softly. "The humming helps regulate breathing, slows the heartbeat, reminds the body it's safe." Ethan nodded slowly. "I didn't know that." "It's how I survived," she admitted. "When you can't control the world, you control your breath." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw that calm wasn't just her nature. It was something she had built, note by note, to survive her own storms. They stepped into the hallway together. The air smelled of rain and faint lavender. Ethan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Do you ever stop carrying other people's pain?" he asked quietly. Naomi smiled. "No. You just learn to hold it without drowning." He gave a small nod. "Thank you for holding mine tonight." She met his eyes for a moment, then glanced away. "We're all trying to keep someone from sinking." When she returned to her room, she sat by the window for a long time, listening to the rain. Across the hall, Ethan lingered outside his son's door, the glow of the nightlight spilling onto the floor. He thought of Grace, of her lullabies, of all the moments he had avoided because they hurt too much to face. He whispered to the empty air, "I'm still here, Grace. I'm learning how to be the kind of father you'd want me to be." The narrator's voice enters softly, calm and reflective, like the sound of water running over stones. Nightmares are the body's way of remembering what the heart cannot speak. But sometimes, in the gentle hum of another's voice, fear learns it can rest. Healing doesn't always come in daylight. It begins in the dark, when someone chooses to stay. The invitation had arrived printed on cream cardstock with gold lettering that shimmered in the light. The kind of invitation that didn't ask if you wanted to come. It announced that your presence was expected. The Caldwell Foundation's annual charity gala was meant to be a night of elegance and generosity, a celebration of good fortune shared. But beneath its polished surface, it was also a performance, a way to prove that wealth could still look graceful, even while hiding a scar. For Ethan Caldwell, this year's gala carried a weight heavier than champagne flutes and speeches. It was the first one since Grace's death. Every newspaper column, every corporate partner, every silent critic waiting to whisper that he'd changed, that the widower had lost his charm, that his children had become proof of his unraveling. They would all be there. "Are you sure about bringing them?" Maya Turner asked that afternoon as she helped him review the seating chart. Ethan didn't look up from his notes. "They're part of this family, Maya. People need to see that." "People," she said gently, "can be cruel." Naomi, who had just walked in with the boys, caught the end of the sentence. "Then maybe it's time they see something better." The triplets were dressed in tiny tuxedos, hair combed back, looking like miniature versions of their father. Cal fidgeted with his bow tie. Noah tried not to yawn, and Liam spun in circles, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Naomi crouched to their level. "Tonight isn't about being perfect," she told them softly. "It's about showing kindness, even when the lights are too bright." Cal frowned. "What if we mess up?" "Then we'll clean it up," she said simply. "Tutitatum." Together. That night, the mansion transformed. Chandeliers burned with golden light. Violins hummed beneath soft conversation, and photographers gathered like polite vultures near the entrance. Naomi stayed with the boys in a side room adjoining the ballroom, a space filled with catering trays, bouquets waiting to be rotated, and too many mirrors. She kept them occupied with a game of spot the fancy word, making them guess what hors d'oeuvres meant. Ethan was across the hall, greeting donors and shaking hands, his practiced smile hiding the nerves that still knotted his chest. On the edge of the crowd stood Daphne Rhodes, an influencer with a camera in her manicured hand, streaming the event live. Her followers loved luxury, especially when it cracked. "Behind the scenes of the Caldwell Charity Gala," she said into the lens, her voice smooth and amused. "Let's see if the billionaire can keep his halo on him." When she wandered too close to the service corridor, she found exactly what she didn't know she was looking for. 3 small boys, restless, curious, and very much alive. "Hi there," she cooed, tilting her phone toward them. "Are you the famous triplets?" Cal instinctively stepped in front of his brothers. "We're not famous." "Oh, but you are," Daphne said with a grin. "Everyone wants to know how you're doing." Naomi appeared in the frame a second later, calm but firm. "Ma'am, they're children. Please don't film them." "Oh, come on," Daphne teased. "Just saying hi. My viewers love a happy family story." Naomi's tone cooled. "Then perhaps find one that's true." She gently guided the boys back toward their table. But before she could corral all 3, Liam, still half distracted by the sparkling trays nearby, reached for a tall glass of fruit punch perched precariously on the edge of a catering cart. His small fingers brushed it, and the world slowed. The glass tipped. A cascade of crimson liquid poured down onto a guest's white designer gown, a shimmering silk masterpiece that cost more than Naomi's yearly salary. The room gasped. The woman shrieked. Cameras clicked like cicadas in summer. "Oh my God!" Daphne's voice cut through the noise, gleeful. "The billionaire's kids just attacked a guest." Naomi grabbed napkins, her movements quick, controlled. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. He didn't mean—" But the cameras were already there. The laughter, the panic, the whispered word unruly spreading like perfume through the air. Ethan arrived seconds later, confusion and horror flashing across his face. "What happened?" The guest pointed at Liam, who was now crying quietly behind Naomi's leg. "Your child threw a drink at me." "He didn't throw it," Naomi said. "It was an accident. I take full responsibility." Ethan's gaze flicked between them. Naomi, the soaked guest, the crowd, the flashing phones. He felt the weight of every stare. This was supposed to be Grace's legacy night. He could almost hear the headlines already forming. Naomi stepped forward before he could speak. "Please, everyone," she said, voice steady but kind. The boy was startled by the noise and lost his grip. "There's no harm meant. Children make mistakes, and adults, if we're honest, should remember that." Her calm didn't silence the whispers, but it changed their tone. There was something in her composure that made people hesitate. Still, Daphne's camera stayed up, catching every angle, every drop of humiliation. Ethan wanted to end the night, to pull the plug on the entire event. But he couldn't. Not with sponsors watching, not with cameras recording. Maya whispered urgently beside him, "If this spreads, you'll lose investors." "I don't care about investors," he muttered. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Naomi met his gaze across the room, and in that look, he saw something he hadn't felt in months: steadiness. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't ashamed. She was simply holding her ground. "Let's get them home," she said quietly. He nodded, grateful. By morning, the clip had already gone viral. The title scrolled across every screen: "Billionaires' Brats Attack Guests at Charity Gala." There were slow-motion replays of Liam's startled face, sensational captions, threads of mockery. In one clip, Naomi's voice could be heard faintly, calm, apologetic, dignified, but no one seemed interested in that part. Ethan's phone buzzed endlessly. Maya walked into his office, pale. "PR says you have to issue a statement. They're calling her unqualified and you neglectful. Sponsors are panicking." He sank into his chair, rubbing his forehead. "How bad is it?" "They're already using a hashtag," she said softly. "Nannygate." Meanwhile, Naomi sat at the breakfast table with the triplets. The boys were unusually quiet. Cal picked at his toast. "Are we in trouble?" "No," she said. "You made a mistake, and I made sure it was my responsibility. That's what grown-ups do when they love someone." Noah's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone's mad at us." "They'll forget soon," Naomi said gently. "But we'll remember to be kind when someone else makes a mess." Liam leaned against her arm, whispering, "You're not leaving, right?" She brushed his hair softly. "Not a chance." In another part of the house, Ethan stood before the large window of his study, watching the headlines scroll across a muted television. Behind him, Maya's voice trembled with practical advice. "The lawyers say you should distance the company from her. They think she's become a liability." Ethan turned slowly. "She's the only reason this family's still standing." The narrator's voice closes over the image like dusk settling on glass. Sometimes the world mistakes love for weakness. But strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands quietly beside a crying child, unashamed, willing to take the blame that wasn't its own. By the next morning, the world had already made up its mind. The video from the gala wasn't just viral, it was everywhere. It played on breakfast television, scrolled endlessly on social feeds, and flashed across gossip blogs that made fortunes out of other people's misfortune. Each replay had a new caption: "Billionaire's black nanny loses control. Children of chaos. When wealth turns wild." Inside the Caldwell mansion, the day started not with sunlight, but with screens glowing cold blue. Maya Turner stood in the living room, holding her tablet like a piece of bad news she couldn't put down. "It's all over the internet," she said quietly to Ethan. "There's no containing it." Ethan hadn't slept. He was still in the clothes from last night, the tie loosened but not removed, as if undressing would make it real. He reached for the tablet, scrolling through headlines that felt sharper than glass. Each article twisted what had happened into something unrecognizable. Naomi encouraged bad behavior, failed to discipline, embarrassed the host. "Fire her," one headline demanded. "Reclaim control." Ethan set the tablet down, jaw tight. "Control," he muttered, "isn't what's missing." Maya hesitated. "Your investors think otherwise. The PR team wants an official statement, something neutral. No mention of her at all." He looked up, disbelief in his eyes. "No mention? She took the blame for my son. She protected him." "Sometimes protection looks like silence," Maya said carefully. Ethan didn't answer. He turned toward the window, where the garden stretched wide and empty. Somewhere outside, he could hear the faint laughter of the boys playing under Naomi's watch. It was the only sound that felt real. Downstairs, Naomi was pretending the world wasn't burning. She poured orange juice into 3 cups, smiling as if nothing had changed. But the boys weren't fooled. Cal stared at the television muted on the wall, where his own face flickered in slow motion. "They're saying we're bad kids," he said quietly. Noah climbed onto a chair, watching the images. "Why do people who don't know us get to talk about us?" Naomi took the remote and turned the screen off. "Because sometimes, when people don't understand love, they try to explain it like it's a mistake." Liam tugged at her sleeve. "Did we make you lose your job?" She crouched down to meet his eyes. "No, sweetheart. You can't make someone lose something that was never about money." But later, when she stepped into the hallway, her calm began to slip. She could hear the phones ringing in the study, the muffled sound of Maya's voice talking to lawyers, the sharp tone of reporters asking for statements. For the first time since she arrived, Naomi felt like an intruder again, an outsider in a house that had started to feel like home. Ethan found her standing by the staircase. "You shouldn't have to face this," he said. She looked up at him, tired but steady. "I'm not ashamed, Mr. Caldwell. They needed me to protect them, so I did." He nodded. "I know. But this is different. The press is ruthless. They'll twist everything." "They already have," he sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "My legal team insists I release a statement without naming you. They say any public defense could look personal." Naomi's expression didn't change, but her voice softened. "It is personal." He looked at her then, really looked, and something like guilt flickered across his face. "You think I should fight back? I think you can't hide love from the world and expect it to grow," she said quietly. "You can try to manage a scandal, or you can tell the truth. But only one will heal your family." He didn't answer, not right away. For a man who commanded boardrooms, who had built empires out of logic and strategy, it was humbling to realize that the right choice might simply be honesty. That afternoon, Naomi received the first phone call from Child Protective Services. The voice on the other end was polite but clinical, the kind of voice used to bad news. "Ms. Ellis, this is Officer Morales. We'll be scheduling a home observation in light of recent public concerns. It's routine, but we'll need full cooperation." "Of course," Naomi said. "You're welcome anytime." When she hung up, her hands trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, steadying herself the way she always taught the boys. In for 4, out for 6. Calm wasn't something you waited for. It was something you built. That evening, the mansion filled with the low hum of worry. Ethan had canceled meetings, Maya fielded calls, and reporters waited at the gates like wolves dressed as courtiers. Naomi gathered the boys in the living room. Tomorrow, someone's coming to visit, she said gently. They just want to see how we live, how we take care of each other. Cal frowned. Because of the video? Yes, she admitted. Sometimes when people don't understand, they want proof. Noah looked anxious. Do we have to act good? Naomi smiled. You don't have to act. Just be yourselves. That's good enough. Liam frowned. What if they don't like us? Then they'll learn what love looks like anyway, she said. Ethan entered quietly then, overhearing her last words. She's right, he said. We're not putting on a show. We're just being a family. Naomi turned toward him, surprised. You're staying for the observation? Of course, he said. I've hidden long enough. Later that night, when the boys were asleep, Naomi sat alone in her room. The glow from her phone, screen cast faint light on her face. Messages kept arriving, some from strangers offering support, others filled with cruelty. She scrolled past the hate, her thumb steady but her heart heavy. Her foster mother's old words echoed in her mind. People will always talk, child. Let them. You just keep living a life that speaks louder. She looked out the window. The garden below was lit by the faint reflection of the moon, the roses swaying in the night wind. Somewhere down there, Grace Caldwell's favorite flowers kept blooming, unaware of scandal, untouched by headlines. In the study, Ethan recorded his official statement. Maya adjusted the camera, keeping her expression neutral. Ready? She asked. He nodded. Let's begin. He looked into the lens, his voice steady. My family and I are grateful for the concern and attention this week, but there's been a misunderstanding. The incident at our charity event was a simple accident, nothing more. My sons are children, loved, learning, and safe. And Naomi Ellis, the caregiver you've seen in those videos, has been nothing but patient, professional, and kind. She's part of the reason our home still knows laughter. Maya looked up from her tablet, startled. You're going off script. Ethan smiled faintly. Good. When the recording ended, he leaned back in his chair. If they're going to talk, he said quietly, let them hear the truth from me. The narrator's voice returns, calm and reflective, weaving the day's noise into something almost still. Scandals feed on silence, but truth only needs a whisper. Sometimes dignity isn't about staying unseen. It's about standing still when the world demands you hide. The night after Ethan's statement went public, the mansion was quieter than usual. Even the air seemed to move softly, as if afraid to disturb whatever fragile peace might still exist. The world outside was loud, reporters waiting by the gates, articles still circulating, strangers arguing online about people they had never met. But inside, there was a kind of hush that only comes after a storm. Naomi Ellis sat at her small desk, the glow of her lamp casting a warm circle on the wall. She was writing, though the words didn't come easily. A note to herself, perhaps, or maybe a letter she would never send. Dear Grace, she began, and then stopped. She wasn't sure why she'd written the name. Maybe because everything about this house still felt touched by the woman who had built it with love. She tried again. Some nights I still wonder if I belong here. The children trust me now. And Ethan, well, he listens. But I can't tell if I've fixed something or only borrowed it. She read the words, then quietly tore the page in half. She wasn't here to replace anyone, she reminded herself. She was here to stay until the family could stand without her. That had always been her promise. But promises are heavy things to carry alone. A soft knock came at her door. Naomi quickly wiped her eyes. Come in. It was Cal, holding a flashlight, his pajamas slightly rumpled. Behind him stood Noah and Liam, each carrying a pillow and a blanket. "What's all this?" she asked, smiling despite herself. Cal hesitated. "We thought maybe you needed company." Naomi blinked. "At midnight?" Liam nodded solemnly. "You looked sad at dinner." She tried to laugh, but the sound came out too small. "Sad? I was just tired." Noah stepped forward. "We know what tired sad looks like." Something inside her softened. They had learned empathy the hard way, through loss. She opened the door wider. "All right then. Come in, my little detectives of feelings." They climbed onto the bed, arranging themselves in a tangle of limbs and blankets. Cal held the flashlight like a torch on an adventure, casting shapes on the ceiling. "Are you scared about tomorrow?" he asked quietly. Naomi pretended to misunderstand. "Tomorrow? Why would I be scared?" "Because that lady from the child office is coming," Noah said. "What if she says we can't be a family anymore?" Naomi paused, then sat beside them. "Do you know what people like her really look for?" They shook their heads. "She looks for safety," Naomi explained gently. "For kindness, for love. And if she sees that, she'll know this is exactly where you belong." Liam yawned, leaning against her arm. "What about you?" he murmured. "Will she let you stay?" Naomi smiled sadly. "That's up to life, not her. But if I do have to go one day, I'll still be with you here." She placed a hand over her heart. "You don't lose people who loved you right." The boys were quiet. Cal set down the flashlight, the beam sliding across their faces like a moonbeam. "You really think everything's gonna be okay?" "I think," she said softly, "that love always finds a way to be seen, even when people try to make it small." Silence followed, the kind that doesn't ask for words. Liam drifted to sleep first, his breathing deep and steady. Noah soon followed, his small hand still gripping hers. Cal stayed awake a little longer. He whispered, "If you have to go, I'll look after them." Naomi looked at him, the eldest by only minutes, but already carrying too much weight. "You shouldn't have to be the grown-up," she said gently. "That's my job." He shrugged, blinking against the pull of sleep. "Someone's gotta." Her throat tightened. She brushed a hand through his hair. "You remind me of me when I was your age," she whispered. "Always watching, always guarding, but even guards need rest." He didn't answer. By the time she finished the sentence, he was asleep too. Naomi sat there for a long time, the room dim and still. The flashlight had rolled to the floor, the soft glow barely reaching the edges of the carpet. She thought of her first night in the foster home she could barely remember, how she had slept with her shoes still on, in case she had to leave quickly. How strange it felt now to be surrounded by children who, for the first time, wanted her to stay. She whispered to the dark, "You're safe now, all of you." Outside her window, the rain that had started earlier in the evening turned to mist. The city lights shimmered faintly beyond the hill. Down the hall, Ethan stood in his study, staring at the muted television screen still showing yesterday's headlines. He hadn't realized how quiet the house had become until the silence made his ears ring. He turned off the screen and walked toward the guest corridor, intending to check on Naomi, to thank her again for how she'd handled the press, how she'd calmed the children. When he reached her door, he stopped. Through the small crack of light under it, he saw the soft shadows moving. Naomi sitting on the bed, surrounded by the boys sleeping like a small pile of warmth. The sight made him pause. It was the most peaceful image he'd seen in years. For a moment, he thought of Grace. of how she used to hum lullabies late into the night, her voice steady even when exhaustion made her eyes heavy. There was something almost sacred in watching someone care without condition. He didn't knock. He didn't want to disturb them. Instead, he leaned against the wall across the hall, closed his eyes, and let himself feel something he hadn't let in for a long time. Gratitude, pure and simple. When Naomi finally stirred, she noticed the silhouette of Ethan through the thin gap of the door. She smiled faintly, knowing he was there but said nothing. There were moments that didn't need words. The narrator's voice moves in then, low and warm, like a soft breath over candlelight. Sometimes faith borrows small hands. On the nights when strength falters, it's the innocent who remind us why we stayed. In a house once filled with echoes of loss, love learned to whisper again, quiet, steady, and unafraid of the dark. Morning came with the quiet hum of nerves. The air inside the Caldwell mansion carried a kind of stillness that didn't feel restful. It felt like the moment before a storm. The day had arrived when the world would speak again, not through whispers, but through the glow of television screens. The major morning network had scheduled a live panel discussion about the Caldwell incident. Clips from the gala would be played. Experts and commentators, all strangers, would sit in a bright studio and discuss Naomi Ellis, the unqualified caregiver, and the discipline crisis of America's elite families. Naomi stood at the kitchen counter pouring coffee, pretending not to notice the tension radiating from every corner of the house. Clara Nguyen tried to offer a smile as she buttered toast. "You don't have to watch it, you know," she said. Naomi stirred her coffee. "I think I do. The boys will see it eventually. Better they see it with me." When the triplets padded into the kitchen, still in pajamas, she crouched to meet their uncertain eyes. "Today, something important is on TV," she said gently. "People might say things about us that aren't true. We're going to watch it together, so we can talk about it after. We tell our own story, remember?" They nodded, unsure but trusting. In the study, Ethan hesitated by the door. He wasn't sure if joining them would help or hurt. His instinct was to shield, to turn off the world and pretend it wasn't watching. But then he remembered Naomi's words from the night before. You can't hide love from the world and expect it to grow. So he joined them. The family gathered in the living room, Naomi on the couch with Liam leaning against her, Cal and Noah flanking Ethan on the other side. The television flickered to life, filling the room with two bright colors and polished smiles. The host's voice was cheerful but edged. "This morning, we're discussing the now viral incident involving billionaire Ethan Caldwell's triplets and their nanny, Naomi Ellis. Was it an innocent accident or a sign of neglect?" A clip from the gala played, the punch spilling, the gasps, the brief chaos, edited to look far worse than it was. Slow motion made every second dramatic. Naomi could feel the boys tense beside her. "That's not what happened," Noah whispered. "I know," Naomi said softly, "but let's listen first. Then we'll talk." The panelists spoke one by one. A parenting expert argued that boundaries were essential. A former etiquette coach shook her head in disapproval. A social commentator leaned forward with faux concern. It's tragic when privilege meets incompetence. These children clearly need structure. The words washed over the room like cold water. Ethan clenched his fists, jaw tightening. "They're children, not a case study," he muttered. Naomi placed a hand on his arm, not to silence him, but to steady him. "Let them talk," she said. "We're not here to fight." We're here to understand how little they see. Then, something unexpected happened. A new voice joined the broadcast, a recorded clip from a guest who had been at the gala. It was Daphne Rhodes, the influencer who had first streamed the video. On screen, she smiled at the host. "To be honest, I didn't mean for it to blow up like this, but when people act like that in public, it's bound to get attention." The host nodded solemnly. "And you think the nanny was to blame?" Daphne hesitated, eyes flicking away. "I don't know. She was calm, I'll give her that. But maybe that's the problem. She didn't act like someone who knew her place." Naomi exhaled quietly. Her voice was calm when she spoke to the boys. "You see, people sometimes mistake calm for guilt. But calm is just peace refusing to panic." Cal frowned. Why would she say those things if she was there? "Because sometimes telling the truth doesn't get as many views," Naomi said. The panel continued, words turning sharp again, but she barely heard them now. The children's faces told her everything: confusion, hurt, and the beginnings of shame. She couldn't let that be their last feeling. She picked up the remote and lowered the volume. "All right," she said softly. "Now that you've seen it, tell me what you think really happened." Liam was first. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to spill it." "I know, love," Naomi said. "What else?" Noah frowned in concentration. "People only saw what they wanted to see." "And what did we see?" Naomi asked. Cal spoke quietly. "You stood up for us." Naomi smiled. "Then that's the story we'll keep." The air seemed to lighten, the heaviness slowly replaced by something sturdier, truth reclaiming space. Ethan looked at her with quiet awe. "You turned a public attack into a family meeting," he said. She shrugged gently. "Children can survive almost anything if you help them make sense of it. If you don't, it turns into a scar." Outside, the sound of rain returned, soft and steady. Naomi muted the television completely. The moving lips on screen no longer mattered. She pointed toward the window where the raindrops slid down in crooked lines. "Do you see how the rain leaves marks?" she asked. Liam nodded. "But they go away when the sun comes." "Exactly," she said. "Words can do that too. They leave marks, but love can wash them off." Ethan leaned back on the couch, watching his sons. The simple metaphor, the calm after so much noise, it grounded him. For weeks he had been chasing control, afraid of the next storm. Now he realized the answer had been in front of him all along. Understanding wasn't a strategy, it was a practice. When the program ended, Maya entered hesitantly, holding her phone. "It's trending again," she said, her voice uncertain. "But something's changed." Naomi looked up. "Changed how?" Maya turned the screen toward them. A new wave of comments was flooding in. Strangers defending her, calling out the cruelty of the coverage, sharing clips of Ethan's statement from the night before. One comment, simple and pinned to the top, read, "She didn't lose control. She taught them what control looks like." Ethan smiled faintly. "Looks like the truth finally learned to speak up." Naomi's eyes softened. "It usually does if you give it time." The boys, sensing the change, began to chatter again. About cookies, about homework, about anything that wasn't the news. Naomi laughed with them, her shoulders finally relaxing. Ethan watched her for a long moment, thinking of Grace again. How she'd always said that dignity wasn't silence. It was choosing to be kind when everyone else wasn't. He realized, with quiet gratitude, that Naomi hadn't just brought calm back into his home. She had reminded him that kindness could survive even the public square. The narrator's voice returns, low and warm, like the final note of a cello fading into quiet. The world loves to speak about others, but love teaches us to speak to each other. In a room once haunted by fear, truth found its voice. Not through shouting, but through the steady calm of someone who refused to let lies raise her children. The morning began with the kind of fragile quiet that always comes before judgment. The sky was pale and overcast, the light soft but uncertain, like the world itself was holding its breath. Naomi Ellis stood in the kitchen, with a mug of tea warming her hands, watching the clock. Today was the day Officer Jenna Morales from Child Protective Services would visit the Caldwell home. She'd told herself not to worry. She'd faced tougher rooms, harsher stares, colder questions. But this was different. This wasn't about her resume or her worth. It was about the children, the boys who had learned, slowly and painfully, that they were safe with her. She couldn't bear the thought of someone misreading their chaos as neglect or their noise as danger. Ethan joined her by the counter, still in his crisp shirt but without a tie. He'd canceled his meetings again. His jaw was set, his eyes tired but determined. "Are you ready?" he asked. Naomi gave a small smile. "Ready as I'll ever be." "You sure we shouldn't make the house look neater?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Let her see it how it really is. A house that's lived in, not staged." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "You really aren't afraid of anything, are you?" Naomi took a slow sip of her tea. "I'm afraid of pretending." By 9:30, the sound of tires crunched on the gravel outside. The triplets, freshly dressed and nervously curious, pressed their faces against the window. A silver sedan pulled up, and a woman in a navy blazer stepped out, holding a brown folder and an expression that managed to be both kind and cautious. "That's her," Cal whispered. "She looks nice," Liam said hopefully. Naomi placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "She's just here to see how we live. We'll be ourselves. That's all we ever need to be." When Officer Morales entered the foyer, she smiled politely. "Good morning. I appreciate you making time for me." Ethan offered his hand. "Thank you for coming. I hope this won't take too much of your day." Her eyes moved gently through the space. The family photographs, the faint scent of cinnamon from Clara's baking, the faint scuff marks on the floor from children's shoes. "I don't mind time," she said. "Time tells me the truth." Naomi led her through the house, answering questions that seemed simple but carried weight. How were the children? Disciplined? How were their meals handled? What was their bedtime routine? Each answer came with a memory, a glimpse of the life she'd helped rebuild. The syrup war, the night of nightmares, the mornings filled with soft laughter. "May I observe them for a bit?" Officer Morales asked. "Of course," Naomi said. In the playroom, the triplets were halfway through building a cardboard fort. Cal explained the design proudly. "This wall's for defense and this part's for reading." The officer smiled. "Impressive. You built this yourselves?" "With Miss Naomi," Noah said. "She says we need a safe place, even if it's made of boxes." "That's good advice," Morales said, glancing at Naomi. They moved to the kitchen, where Liam was helping Clara measure flour for cookies. When he spilled a little, Naomi didn't scold. She simply handed him a cloth. "That's part of learning," she said. Morales watched quietly, taking notes. "You let them make mistakes." "Of course," Naomi replied. "Mistakes are how they learn they're still loved afterward." The officer didn't respond right away, but Naomi saw the faint curve of understanding in her expression. Later, Morales asked to speak with the children alone for a few minutes. Naomi hesitated, but Ethan nodded. "It's standard procedure," he said quietly. She stepped outside the room, her heartbeat steady but fast. Through the slightly open door, she could hear their small voices answering questions. "Do you feel safe here?" "Yes," Cal said. "It's noisy sometimes, but good noisy." "Who helps you when you're scared?" "Miss Naomi," Noah replied without hesitation. "She knows how to breathe slow with us." "And your dad?" Liam chimed in. "He makes pancakes now. They're bad, but we like them." Naomi smiled to herself, her throat tightening with quiet emotion. When Morales emerged, she thanked the boys and joined Naomi and Ethan in the study. "I appreciate your openness," she said. "Would it be all right if I spent the rest of the morning just observing?" "Please do," Ethan said. And so she did. She followed quietly through breakfast cleanup, through the boys' reading hour, through a small disagreement over who got which color crayon. Naomi didn't hover or perform. She let the day unfold the way it always did, imperfectly, honestly. When the boys grew restless, she took them outside. Morales trailed a few steps behind as Naomi knelt in the garden, helping Cal water his sunflower sprout. "Look," Cal said proudly. "It's getting taller." Naomi smiled. "See what patience does?" Morales watched the exchange, her pen forgotten in her hand. By early afternoon, she closed her notebook. "I think I've seen what I needed," she said. Ethan's voice was calm but curious. "And what do you see?" Morales looked around the house one last time. The art on the refrigerator, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, the faint scent of cookies drifting from the kitchen. "I see children who feel safe," she said simply. "Not perfect, just safe. And that's the best kind of home there is." Naomi exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders for the first time all day. Ethan reached out, resting a hand lightly on the back of her chair, a small, silent gesture of gratitude. Before leaving, Officer Morales paused at the door. "You've built something rare here," she said to Naomi. "Most people hide their chaos when I visit. You showed me your truth instead. That takes courage." Naomi smiled. "Chaos is where love practices patience." Morales nodded. "I'll file my report by the end of the week, but for what it's worth, you have nothing to worry about." When the car disappeared down the drive, the house exhaled with her. The boys ran toward Naomi, wrapping their arms around her legs. "Did we do good?" Liam asked. "You did perfect," she said, laughing softly. "Because you were yourselves." Ethan looked at her, the afternoon light catching the edge of a smile. "She's right, you know. You have built something rare." Naomi met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. "We built it together." The narrator's voice drifts over the image of the garden, the children's laughter mixing with the sound of wind through the roses. Love doesn't need to be proven by perfection. It reveals itself in the ordinary, in flour on the counter, in muddy shoes, in small hands that know they're safe. When truth is witnessed, even judgment can become grace. The following morning dawned clear, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness after days of gray. The roses in the garden shimmered with dew, and for once, the mansion seemed to breathe easily. The boys were playing quietly in the sunroom, arguing over who could build the tallest tower, while Naomi Ellis sat at the kitchen counter writing a grocery list she didn't really need. Her hands were steady, but her mind was still circling the words Officer Morales had said the day before. "You have nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about." And yet worry had become such a constant companion that its absence felt strange, like silence after years of noise. Ethan found her there, the morning paper folded under his arm. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie missing. He looked less like the billionaire on magazine covers and more like a man still learning how to live in his own skin. "You're up early," he said. "Habit," Naomi replied with a small smile. "Some of us like to meet the day before it gets noisy." He leaned against the counter. "The CPS report came in an hour ago." Naomi froze. "Already?" He nodded, unfolding a page and sliding it toward her. "Cleared. Completely. They found no cause for concern." Relief flooded through her so quickly she had to take a breath before speaking. "That's good. That's really good." Ethan studied her face for a moment. "You don't look surprised." "I'm not," she said softly. "Love leaves evidence." He smiled at that, a real smile, not the polite kind he gave reporters. "I like that line. You should write a book someday." She laughed. "One thing at a time." They stood in a companionable silence until Maya Turner entered, her phone buzzing in her hand. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her expression mixed between nerves and disbelief. "You might want to see this." Ethan frowned. "Another headline?" "Actually, yes," Maya said, placing the phone on the counter and pressing play on a video. "But not the kind we're used to." The screen lit up with the face of Daphne Rhodes, the influencer who had started the storm. She sat in front of a camera again, but this time her tone was different, softer, hesitant. "Yesterday I saw something I hadn't expected," she said. "The footage from the CPS visit, the smiles, the normal chaos, the kids just being kids. Maybe I was too quick to judge. Maybe the world was. So, to Naomi Ellis, if you're watching this, I'm sorry." Naomi blinked, stunned. Maya muted the video and looked between them. "It's spreading fast. People are calling it the redemption post. The same platforms that tore you apart are suddenly celebrating you." Ethan leaned back against the counter, exhaling. "It's about time." But Naomi shook her head. "It's not about time. It's about truth finally finding a bigger microphone." A quiet fell between them, the kind of silence that carries gratitude. Later that day, Ethan received a call from a major news network. They wanted him and Naomi to do a joint interview, to clarify the narrative. Maya advised against it. "You've already won back the public. No need to risk another spin." But Ethan didn't hesitate. "No, we're doing it. If we've learned anything from this, it's that silence is a kind of lie." When Naomi heard, she felt a flicker of uncertainty. "You don't have to defend me," she said. "People forget scandals as quickly as they start." Ethan shook his head. "This isn't about defending you. It's about telling the truth, the full truth, together." That evening, they sat side by side under the soft lights of a television studio. The setting was calm. Neutral backdrop, warm tones, nothing flashy. The interviewer smiled politely. "Mr. Caldwell, Ms. Ellis, thank you for being here." Ethan spoke first. "Thank you for having us." The interviewer turned to Naomi. "The public has seen a lot about you lately, Ms. Ellis. Some of it cruel, some of it compassionate. How have you managed to stay calm?" Naomi's voice was steady, almost serene. "Calm doesn't mean unaffected. I've been angry, hurt, scared. But I've also been reminded that children watch how we handle pain. If we want them to learn grace, we have to show it." The interviewer nodded. "And the children? How are they handling all of this?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Better than most adults I know." They've taught me more about forgiveness than I ever thought possible." He paused, then continued, his tone deeper. "You know, when my wife died, I thought love had an expiration date, that once it ended in one form, it couldn't exist in another. But Naomi came into our lives and proved me wrong. She healed what money couldn't. She reminded me that family isn't about perfection. It's about staying." Naomi looked at him, eyes glistening. The interviewer glanced between them but said nothing, sensing something raw unfolding. When the segment aired that night, the clip of Ethan's words spread faster than any scandal ever had. The internet, so quick to wound, turned tender. Comments filled with apologies, empathy, even admiration. Strangers wrote things like, "It's rare to see truth handled with dignity." The next morning, the triplets burst into Naomi's room, waving a tablet. "You're famous again," Liam shouted. Naomi groaned. "Oh no, not again." "No, it's good," Noah said. "They're calling you the calm hero." Cal smirked. "That's a weird superhero name," she laughed. "Maybe, but I'll take it." Ethan appeared at the doorway, leaning against the frame. "You've officially outtrended me," he said, amused. Naomi folded her arms. "Good. You needed a break from the spotlight." He chuckled, then turned serious. "You know, I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing control of the narrative. But it turns out, the best thing that could happen was losing control and finding the truth instead." She tilted her head. "And what's the truth, Mr. Caldwell?" He met her gaze, his voice low. "That sometimes love looks like humility on live television." The triplets giggled without knowing exactly why, and the room filled with the kind of laughter that doesn't have to be perfect to heal. Outside, the sunlight slipped across the floor, turning the walls gold. Naomi looked at it and thought, for the first time since she had arrived, that maybe the world had finally stopped waiting for her to prove herself. Maybe it had started listening instead. The narrator's voice enters gently, rich and contemplative. "Some truths are too quiet for the headlines. They live in steady hearts, in simple acts of courage, a father who speaks up, a woman who stays, and children who learn that love is louder than shame. When compassion stands in the light, the world remembers what dignity looks like." 6 months passed like sunlight across a slow-moving garden. Soft, steady, almost unnoticeable, until one day everything had changed. The Caldwell mansion, once filled with echoes and tension, had found a quieter rhythm. Laughter had replaced shouting. Footsteps no longer stomped, but danced. Even the walls seemed to breathe easier, as if the house itself had been waiting for this peace. Ethan Caldwell had started leaving the office earlier, not because his company needed less of him, but because his family finally did. He still worked hard, but the sharp edges of ambition had softened into something simpler. Every Friday morning, no matter how chaotic his week had been, he would make breakfast. His pancakes were still uneven, and his eggs were occasionally overcooked. But the boys called it Dad's Breakfast Day, and that made all the difference. Naomi Ellis watched the transformation quietly. Healing, she knew, rarely came in a single moment of revelation. It arrived through repetition, through the same gentle acts, again and again, until the body and heart began to believe that safety wasn't temporary. Some mornings, when the sunlight slipped across the kitchen floor, she would find the triplets sitting together, doing their homework without argument. On those mornings, she would pause, a cup of tea warming her hands, and think to herself, so this is what grace looks like when it grows roots. At school, the teachers began sending home better reports. Cal was more focused. Noah was speaking up in class, and Liam, the most sensitive of the three, had started drawing pictures that weren't just in black and gray. Now his crayons reached for color. Blues, yellows, the faint blush of pink that he said was the color of calm. One weekend, Naomi introduced an idea she had carried for months. She called it the memory garden. It began one afternoon when the boys found an old photo of their mother tucked in a drawer. Grace Caldwell, smiling in the garden that had once been her pride. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and gloves, her hair catching the light. Cal had stared at the photo for a long time. She liked flowers, he said softly. She loved them, Ethan replied. She said every plant was a promise. That night, Naomi found Ethan sitting on the porch steps, looking at the dark patch of soil beyond the roses. The moonlight made his face unreadable. "They miss her," he said quietly, "and I don't know how to help them remember without making it hurt." Naomi sat beside him. "Remembering shouldn't only be pain," she said. "It can be an act of love. Let's make something that grows." The next morning, the project began. The boys helped dig a small section of the garden, messy work that left them covered in dirt and joy. Each of them chose a flower to plant. Cal picked a sunflower, Noah chose a white lily, and Liam, after long thought, decided on lavender. Ethan knelt beside them, hands dirty for the first time in years. Naomi handed him a trowel. "What about you?" she asked. He pointed to a patch near the center. "A rose bush," he said. "Her favorite." The memory garden took shape slowly. They lined the edge with small stones, each one painted by the boys. On some were words, hope, love, breathe. On others, just patterns or initials. Naomi didn't correct the spelling mistakes or smudges. They were honest, and that was the point. When it was finished, Naomi gathered them all around. "Every time you water these flowers," she told the boys, "you're telling your mom that you still remember. And every time something new blooms, it means your love is still alive." Liam frowned. "But what if they stop growing?" Naomi smiled softly. "Then we learn what they need and try again. That's how gardens and families stay alive." As the weeks went by, the memory garden became part of their daily life. On mornings when school felt too hard or emotions ran high, Naomi would take the boys outside. They'd water their flowers and talk about Grace, about her favorite songs, the way she used to dance in the kitchen, the smell of her perfume that lingered in old scarves. Ethan joined them more often than not, his presence no longer shadowed by guilt. Sometimes he'd read from one of Grace's old journals, short notes she'd left about recipes, birthdays, or plans for the next season's roses. It was bittersweet, but Naomi could see how it helped him breathe again. One evening, as the sun melted into gold over the horizon, Naomi stood by the window watching them. Ethan was kneeling in the garden with the boys, showing them how to prune the stems without hurting the petals. The laughter that rose from that scene was easy, familiar, the sound of a house that had learned how to heal out loud. When they came back inside, Ethan found Naomi still by the window. "You created something beautiful," he said. She turned to him. "You all did. I just planted the first seed." He hesitated, then smiled. "Grace would have liked you. I think we would have understood each other," she said quietly. That night, Naomi wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in months. "Healing doesn't look like forgetting," she wrote. "It looks like tending what remains until it blooms again." Weeks turned into months, and the rhythms of ordinary life began to feel sacred. Ethan learned to make coffee exactly the way Naomi liked it. Maya started visiting the house more often, not as a PR manager, but as a friend. Clara taught the boys how to bake biscuits without burning the tray. The house that had once been defined by loss had begun to redefine itself through the simplest of miracles: laughter, meals, flowers, forgiveness. One Saturday morning, Liam came running inside, holding something small in his hand. "Look," he shouted, "the lavender has flowers." Naomi took the stem carefully. "You see, it just needed time." Cal grinned. "Like us." Naomi smiled. "Exactly like you." The narrator's voice enters softly, wrapping around the quiet joy of the moment. Not all miracles arrive in thunder. Some come softly, in school papers pinned to the fridge, in the smell of wet soil, in the way a father learns to come home on time. Healing isn't a single moment. It's the season that follows a long winter, made of mornings that remember how to bloom. The air that evening carried a hush that felt different from every other quiet they had known. It was not the heavy stillness of grief or the forced calm of survival. It was peace, soft, breathing, alive. The sun had already slipped beneath the hills, leaving behind a sky washed in violet and rose. The lanterns Naomi had hung earlier swayed gently in the summer wind, each one glowing with a small, steady light. The memory garden shimmered like a constellation brought down to earth. The boys had begged to help with the setup. They'd tied ribbons on the branches, arranged chairs unevenly, and accidentally stepped in the mud more than once. Naomi had laughed until her stomach hurt. It had been a long time since laughter had come that easily. Now, as the boys chased fireflies nearby, Naomi stood by the rose bush that had been planted for Grace. The petals were just beginning to open for the evening, their scent drifting softly through the air. She bent down, brushing away a leaf, and whispered, "You did well, Grace. They're learning to smile again." She didn't realize Ethan was behind her until she heard his voice. "They couldn't have done it without you." She turned. He was standing a few steps away, sleeves rolled up, the faintest trace of nervous energy in his posture. For months he had looked lighter, not the man burdened by survival, but one learning to live again. And yet tonight, something in his eyes carried weight. "They were your children before they were mine to guide," Naomi said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "They were lost, Naomi, and so was I. You didn't just guide them, you found us." She smiled gently. "You would have found your way eventually." He stepped closer, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his shoes. "Maybe, but it would have taken longer. And the truth is, I don't want to imagine what this place would have become without you." The lantern light flickered across his face. Naomi felt a familiar flutter in her chest, the one she had spent months pushing away. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "That's not what this is." He took a deep breath, as though steadying himself. "You once told me that love isn't about perfection, that it's about staying, through the noise, through the mess, through the silence. I've thought about that every day since." She met his eyes but didn't speak. The wind carried the faint rustle of the roses between them. Ethan continued, voice lower now, unguarded. "You taught me how to breathe again. You taught my sons what patience looks like. You reminded this house what it means to be alive. And I..." He stopped, searching for words that had waited too long. "I love you, Naomi." The world seemed to still for a moment. The lanterns, the air, even the hum of the evening paused to listen. Naomi blinked, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Ethan, Before she could finish, The sound of small feet pounding across the path interrupted them. The triplets came bursting into the garden, breathless and beaming. "Dad!" Cal shouted. "Did you ask her yet?" Ethan froze. "Ask her? What?" Liam grinned, proudly holding up a small box made of Lego bricks. "We made you a ring box." Naomi's hand flew to her mouth as laughter bubbled out. "You didn't—" "Oh, they did," Ethan said, his voice breaking into a smile. "Apparently, I'm being outvoted." Cal stepped forward and opened the box. Inside, nestled among the plastic bricks, was a simple silver band. One Ethan had carried quietly for weeks, unsure when, or even if, he would find the courage to use it. Noah crossed his arms with mock authority. "You have to do it properly, on one knee. That's the rule." Naomi laughed through the tears that were already slipping down her cheeks. "Who taught you that?" "Clara," Liam said proudly. "She said it's called respect." Ethan shook his head, chuckling. "Well, can't argue with Clara." He knelt down slowly, the boys watching with wide eyes as if witnessing magic. "Naomi Ellis," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You walked into our lives when we were broken and made us whole again. You turned our house into a home, and our grief into something gentle. You've been mother, teacher, and light, and I can't imagine another day without you." Naomi's hands trembled slightly as he held out the ring. The boys huddled close, whispering, "Say yes, say yes." She looked at Ethan, her heart full. "I wasn't expecting this," she said softly. "Neither was I," he whispered. "But maybe that's what love really is. The thing you don't expect, but somehow always needed." She nodded, tears shimmering. "Then yes," she said. 1,000 times yes." The triplets erupted in cheers, jumping around them as if they had won a championship. Liam threw his arms around Naomi, while Cal tried to take the ring box back for safekeeping. Noah yelled, "Does this mean we're a team forever?" Naomi laughed, hugging them all at once. "Forever and ever." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, the silver catching the glow of the lanterns, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The garden seemed to breathe with them. After a while, the boys ran off chasing fireflies again, leaving Ethan and Naomi beneath the canopy of stars. She turned her hand, admiring the ring. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He smiled. "They picked it, said it had to be strong but simple, like you." She looked at him, eyes soft. "And what about you?" "Still learning to deserve you," he said quietly. Naomi leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You already do." From somewhere beyond the hedges, the laughter of children drifted through the air, light and endless. The lanterns flickered above them like blessings. The narrator's voice settles over the moment, deep and tender, like the slow turning of a page. Some vows are whispered long before they're spoken. They live in the quiet gestures, in the long patience of staying, in the laughter that returns after sorrow. And when the time finally comes to speak them aloud, the words feel less like promises and more like remembering what love had been saying all along. The morning of the wedding began not with fanfare, but with sunlight. It spilled across the garden in soft gold, touching the petals that had once been planted for memory and now bloomed for promise. The air was still, the kind of stillness that carries only birdsong and the faint laughter of a house not trying to impress anyone anymore. Naomi Ellis woke before the rest of the family. Her dress hung by the window, simple ivory linen, the fabric catching the early light. It wasn't the kind of gown found in magazines or bridal boutiques, but something far better. It looked like her. Calm, honest, uncomplicated. In the mirror, she caught her reflection and smiled, faintly surprised by her own peace. The years had left small lines around her eyes, not from sorrow, but from surviving it. She traced one lightly, whispering to her reflection, "You made it here." Downstairs, Clara was already in the kitchen, bustling like a joyful general. "You should eat," she said when Naomi entered. "You don't want to faint before the I do." Naomi laughed softly. "I've worked through tougher days on less food." "Well," Clara said, handing her a small plate of fruit, "this isn't a work day, it's a blessing day." Through the window, the garden was already transforming. Maya Turner and Mr. Davis, Ethan's longtime business partner, were arranging chairs beneath the willow tree. A few guests had begun to arrive quietly, friends who had seen the family's story unfold from a distance and wanted to witness its gentlest chapter. And then there were the boys. Cal, Noah, and Liam stood proudly in their tiny suits, their hair slicked and slightly uneven from their own attempts to style it. Each wore a small flower pinned to his jacket, one sunflower, one lily, one sprig of lavender, their choices from the memory garden. "Miss Naomi," Liam shouted the moment he saw her, "you look like the sky." She knelt down, smiling through the emotion that rose too quickly. "And you three look like trouble waiting to happen." "We practiced the ring part," Cal announced. "We won't drop it." Noah added seriously, "And we promised not to interrupt the kiss." Naomi blinked, startled into laughter. "Who told you about that?" "Clara," they said together. Ethan appeared behind them then, dressed in a simple dark suit. When Naomi turned, her breath caught for a second, not because of the suit, but because of the look in his eyes. It wasn't the practiced calm of a man used to boardrooms. It was the unguarded warmth of someone who had finally come home. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled. "I think I've been ready for a long time." The ceremony began with no announcement, no music, just the sound of wind moving through the garden. They stood beneath the willow, the boys to one side, Clara and Maya beside them, and a few friends in quiet attendance. Ethan took Naomi's hands, his voice low and sure. "You found us when we had nothing left to give. You gave my sons back their laughter, and you gave me back my life. Today, I promise to keep that safe. To stay, even when it's hard. To protect what we built. Together." Naomi's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. "You once said I taught you to breathe again, but you taught me to trust again. To believe that love can survive what breaks it. I promise to keep believing, no matter the storms that come." The boys exchanged glances, fidgeting until Cal finally whispered, "Can we say ours now?" The guests chuckled, and Ethan nodded. "Go ahead." Liam stepped forward first, holding a small folded piece of paper. His handwriting was crooked, but his words were steady. "We promise to help you when you're tired, to laugh when you're sad, and to never throw syrup at the walls again." Naomi pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. Noah added shyly, "We promise to protect you like you protected us." Cal finished with a grin. "And we promise to let Dad cook once in a while, even if it's terrible." The garden erupted in laughter, and Ethan looked mock-offended. "I'll remember that." As the laughter faded, the officiant, a family friend, smiled. "By the strength of your vows, and in the witness of those who love you, I now pronounce you partners in life." The kiss was simple, brief, and perfect. When they pulled apart, the triplets cheered as if they had just watched fireworks. But before anyone could leave, a familiar figure approached from the path. Officer Morales. She wore her same navy blazer, though her smile was softer than before. "Forgive the intrusion," she said. "I came to deliver something." She handed Ethan a sealed envelope. The case file, officially closed. Ethan opened it, scanning the first page. Inside was a short note written in Morales's neat handwriting. "Sometimes the best evidence is joy. Congratulations to the Caldwell family." He looked up at her, deeply moved. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me," Morales replied gently. "You did the work. I just witnessed it." As she turned to leave, Naomi called out, "Come back any time. We always have cookies." Morales smiled. "I might just take you up on that." The afternoon stretched into a slow celebration. No speeches, no music too loud, just sunlight, laughter, and the smell of roses in bloom. Maya and Mr. Davis toasted quietly with lemonade. Clara wiped her eyes every few minutes. The boys ran barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles that glowed in the light. Later, as dusk settled, Ethan found Naomi sitting beneath the willow, barefoot, her gown slightly wrinkled, her smile soft. He sat beside her, their hands finding each other without thought. "Do you realize," he said, "this is the first time in years the house hasn't felt like it's waiting for something?" She nodded. "That's because it's full." He looked at her, then at the horizon. "Do you think Grace would approve?" Naomi's answer came like a breath. "I think she'd be at peace." As the first stars appeared above them, one of the boys, Liam, came running from the porch, waving a small piece of paper. "Mom! Dad!" Naomi blinked at the word, but didn't correct it. "What is it, sweetheart?" Liam held out the page, grinning. "It's a list of names for the new baby." Ethan's eyes widened. "The what?" Naomi laughed, cheeks flushed. "I was going to tell you tonight." The garden filled with a collective gasp of delight. Clara clapped her hands. The boys screamed with joy, already arguing over names. Ethan leaned close, whispering, "You always did have perfect timing." She laughed through tears. "Life's not waiting anymore, Ethan. It's beginning again." The narrator's voice returns, low and reflective, as the camera of imagination pulls away from the glowing garden. And so, under the same sky that once carried sorrow, love planted its second chance. Some mornings, it will rain again. Some days will test their patience. But tonight, a new dawn rises, and this time, they'll face it together. A year later, the story that had once been whispered with judgment had become something else entirely. The Caldwell name, which once trended for scandal, now appeared beside a different kind of headline, one that carried warmth instead of accusation. "From demon children to healing family," one newspaper wrote. Another simply said, "Love that stayed." But the people inside the story barely noticed. They were too busy living it. The mansion, once filled with reporters and fear, had turned into a place of community. Every Sunday, the garden gate was left open, and local families, single parents, widowers, grandparents raising children, were welcome to visit. They came to talk, to breathe, to learn how to rebuild. Some brought flowers, others brought stories. Everyone left lighter. The idea had begun as a conversation over breakfast. Naomi had been feeding baby Lily, her calm smile illuminated by morning light, when Ethan looked up from the newspaper and said, "People still write to us. They ask how we did it, how we survived everything." Naomi had smiled. "Then, maybe we should tell them." At first, it was just a small gathering in the garden once a month. Naomi would make tea, Ethan would share a few words about loss and learning, and the boys would run around handing out cookies Clara baked by the dozen. But what began as a handful of guests soon grew into something much larger. Within months, they had established the Grace Fund, named after Grace Caldwell, the woman whose memory had become the soil of their healing. The Grace Fund offered small grants to families who had lost a parent, providing support for therapy, education, and simple things like childcare and time off work. "Grief doesn't pay bills," Naomi often said, "but love can build bridges until strength returns." Fact. The Foundation's programs were inspired by real grief support initiatives, community networks that pair practical assistance with emotional education, proving that compassion and structure can heal what policy alone cannot. Soon, the family's story reached places they never expected. A popular magazine ran an article titled "The Nanny Who Stayed." Talk shows, once eager to twist her name, now invited Naomi to speak about her experience. She declined most of them, not out of pride, but out of peace. "The story isn't mine alone anymore," she told Ethan. "It belongs to everyone who decided to stay when walking away would have been easier." Still, one interview she did agree to. A quiet conversation recorded in the same living room where she had once sat trembling during the first wave of judgment. The interviewer, a woman with kind eyes and a soft voice, began simply, "Ms. Caldwell, what does healing look like to you now?" Naomi smiled, the kind that comes from remembering pain without letting it own you. "It looks like breakfast crumbs and muddy shoes," she said. "It looks like laughter after long silence. Healing isn't something you finish, it's something you practice." The clip went viral, but not because it was dramatic. It went viral because it was true. People recognized themselves in her words. The quiet fighters, the ones who showed up for others, even when no one showed up for them. Meanwhile, Ethan had finally done something he'd been avoiding for years. He stepped away from the company. Not entirely, but enough to live differently. "Business can replace itself," he said, "but moments don't wait." He spent afternoons in the garden now, often with baby Lily balanced on his knee and the boys arguing about whose turn it was to water the flowers. One evening, Naomi came out to find him sitting on the porch steps, the sound of cicadas filling the summer air. Lily was asleep in her arms. He smiled when he saw her. "I was just thinking about how strange it feels," he said. "A year ago, we were trying to convince the world we were good people. Now we're just being them." Naomi sat beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder. That's what truth does when you stop chasing it," she said. "It comes home." He laughed softly. "And you've become the most quoted woman on the internet. Did you know someone started printing your words on mugs?" She groaned playfully. "If I see one more coffee cup that says 'Stay when it's hard,' I might start charging royalties." But she didn't mean it, because "Stay when it's hard" had become something bigger. Her first book. It had started as journal entries, scribbled thoughts from long nights in the small room she once feared she didn't belong in. Over time, Ethan encouraged her to shape them into something more. "You've lived a story that can help people," he'd said. The book, titled "Staying When It's Hard: Notes on Love, Loss, and the Work of Healing," had quietly climbed to the top of the bestseller list. Yet even as praise arrived from every corner, Naomi stayed grounded. When asked how she felt about the success, she always answered the same way. The real story is still in the garden. And it was. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Naomi wandered outside. The lanterns still hung from the trees, faintly glowing from the solar light that collected each day. The roses Grace had once planted were in bloom again, and beside them, new flowers swayed. Lavender, lilies, and sunflowers planted by the boys. She knelt, touching the soil, now rich and fragrant. It no longer smelled like sorrow, but like continuity. Behind her, Ethan approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed her one, sitting quietly beside her as the night deepened. "They're calling us the family that stayed," he said. Naomi smiled, shaking her head. "That makes it sound like we did something heroic. All we did was keep showing up." He looked at her thoughtfully. "That's the hardest thing most people ever do." The wind moved gently through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and the faint sound of laughter drifting from inside the house. Naomi took a sip of tea, her voice soft but certain. "Do you think she knows?" "Grace?" Ethan asked. She nodded. He looked out at the flowers. "I think she's been here the whole time, just quieter now." The narrator's voice enters slowly, deep and warm, settling like twilight on the story. Not every miracle arrives with lightning. Some come through persistence, through the quiet rhythm of ordinary days, through people who refuse to let love vanish under noise. And when the world finally listens, it hears not scandal, but survival turned into grace. The seasons had turned again. The sharp heat of summer had softened into a tender autumn, one that carried the scent of apples and fading roses through the open windows of the Caldwell home. The world beyond the gates was busier than ever. The Grace Fund had expanded. Naomi's book had been translated into languages she couldn't pronounce, and interview requests still arrived weekly. But inside the house, time moved at its own, slower pace. The memory garden was the center of that rhythm. It had grown wild and beautiful in its own way, a mix of discipline and freedom, just like the family who tended it. The rose bush that Ethan had planted for Grace was enormous now, its petals spilling over the path like soft fire. The lavender Liam had chosen filled the air with calm. Noah's lilies stood straight and proud, and Cal's sunflowers towered so high they seemed to bow toward the clouds. Every weekend, the family still gathered there. They didn't call it ritual anymore. It was simply what they did, the place where they spoke softly, laughed freely, and remembered without sadness. That afternoon, the air shimmered with golden light. Naomi carried little Lily in her arms, the baby now nearly a year old, chubby and curious, her curls catching the sun like threads of copper. The boys ran ahead, shouting, "Come on, Mom! The roses are bigger than last week!" Ethan followed with a small basket filled with tools and lemonade, his sleeves rolled up, the ease of contentment in his step. When they reached the garden, Naomi set Lily down on a blanket beneath the willow tree. The baby squealed, fascinated by the dappled light that danced across her tiny hands. "Do you think she remembers?" Noah asked suddenly, looking toward the rose bush. "Remembers what?" Naomi asked, though she already knew. "Grandma Grace," he said softly. Naomi crouched beside him, her voice gentle. "I think she remembers in us. Every time we're kind, every time we laugh, every time we grow something beautiful, that's how she knows we're okay." Cal added, "Dad says Grandma's in the wind, watching us." Ethan smiled faintly. "He's right." The boys went back to their work, trimming, watering, and occasionally arguing about who was using the watering can wrong. Naomi watched them, the sound of their voices blending with the rustle of leaves, that ordinary music of family life that she had once prayed would exist here. After a while, Ethan joined her under the tree. "They don't fight as much anymore," he said. "They've learned to listen," she replied. Listening is harder than winning. He looked out across the garden. You know, this place doesn't even feel like the same house. That's because it isn't, Naomi said. It's been rewritten by laughter. He laughed softly. And dirt, and crayons on the walls. She leaned against him. Perfect imperfections. They sat in silence for a moment, watching as Cal helped Lily hold a small trowel. The baby giggled as dirt slipped through her fingers. Noah and Liam were nearby, arranging stones in the shape of a heart around the base of Grace's rosebush. Ethan spoke quietly. You know, I still talk to her sometimes. Grace. Naomi smiled. I know. What would you say if she could answer? He thought for a long time. I'd tell her thank you for loving me enough to let me love again. Naomi's eyes filled softly. Then she'd say you were worth waiting for. The wind moved gently through the branches, and for a brief moment, it sounded almost like a sigh, not of sorrow, but of peace. Later, as the boys packed up their tools, Naomi noticed something on the ground near the rosebush. A single petal, red and luminous, resting on the soil. She picked it up carefully, pressing it between her fingers like a small treasure. Lily reached for it, her eyes wide with fascination. Naomi handed it to her, whispering, That's from Grandma Grace. You can keep it safe. The baby clutched the petal in her fist and laughed. The sky began to deepen into amber and gold, the kind of light that makes every shadow look tender. Ethan took Naomi's hand and said, Let's stay out here a while longer. They sat together, watching their children chase the last rays of sunlight across the grass. It was a simple scene. No headlines, no cameras, no audience, but it held the quiet gravity of everything they had survived. For a while, neither spoke. Then Ethan said softly, Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come that day? Naomi smiled. No, because I did. He nodded. You changed everything. She shook her head gently. No, Ethan. We all did. Healing isn't a rescue. It's a collaboration. From where they sat, the laughter of the children rose again. That pure, unscripted kind of laughter that lives only in families who've learned to forgive the past. The sound reminded Ethan of something he had once read, that the human heart beats roughly 100,000 times a day, and each beat is a chance to start over. He looked at Naomi, at the children, at the garden around them, and realized that's all love really was. The act of beginning again, even when you already have everything you need. As the last light faded, Naomi gathered Lily into her arms. The baby yawned, her small head resting against Naomi's shoulder. The boys followed behind with their tools, and Ethan carried the basket. At the garden gate, Naomi turned for one last look. The lanterns had begun to glow faintly as dusk took over, and the flowers swayed in the wind. Roses, lilies, lavender, and sunflowers, all whispering in unison. Ethan noticed her pause. What is it? Just listening, she said. The garden always says something before we leave. He smiled. What's it saying tonight? She looked toward the rose bush and smiled. It says thank you. The narrator's voice enters like the soft closing of a door, deep and unhurried. In the end, grief is just love with nowhere to go. But when love is given space to grow again, in soil, in laughter, in memory, it finds its way home. And when it does, it doesn't whisper of what was lost. It sings of what still lives. Night settles differently over a house that has learned peace. It doesn't arrive like a curtain falling, but like a gentle blanket being drawn across the shoulders of those who've earned their rest. Inside the Caldwell home, the lights glowed softly, their rhythm matching the quiet heartbeat of a family that no longer feared silence. The day had ended much as it began, with laughter. The boys were upstairs, pretending to be asleep, but whispering stories to one another across their beds. Baby Lily had finally drifted off in Naomi's arms, her breathing small and steady against her mother's chest. Ethan watched from the doorway, smiling in that quiet way he reserved for moments too sacred to break with words. Naomi laid Lily down carefully, tucking the blanket around her. The child murmured once in her sleep and turned toward the light, as if chasing the warmth that filled the room. Naomi stood there a moment longer, her hand resting on the crib rail, the years of struggle and uncertainty replaying faintly behind her eyes. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "You did it." Naomi looked up. "We did it," he smiled. "You ever think about how far we've come?" She chuckled softly. "Every time I hear quiet, it used to mean something was wrong. Now it just means peace." They walked together down the hall, passing framed photographs that told the story better than any article or book could. There was Grace, frozen forever in sunlight. The triplets as toddlers, chaotic and bright. Naomi and Ethan in the garden, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty but happy. And one new frame, the whole family. Lily laughing in Naomi's arms, the boys gathered around her. Ethan standing behind them, eyes warm with quiet pride. They stopped in front of that one. Ethan's voice was thoughtful. "You know, people always ask how we managed to change so much. I never have a good answer." Naomi tilted her head. "Maybe it's not about managing change. Maybe it's about staying still long enough for the heart to catch up." He nodded slowly. "You should put that in your next book." "I might," she said, smiling, "but I'd rather live it first." They stepped outside to the porch. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of roses. The garden shimmered in the moonlight, every flower open as if listening. Naomi sat on the steps, drawing her knees close. Ethan joined her, offering a mug of tea that steamed softly in the air. For a while they said nothing. There was no need to. The wind carried the faint hum of crickets and the sigh of leaves brushing against each other. Ethan finally spoke. "You ever wonder what the story sounds like to people who watched from the outside?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Probably like a miracle. But the truth is, it's just love. Love showing up again and again until the noise gets tired." He nodded. "Dignity," he said quietly. "That's what you gave us. You made dignity feel like something ordinary." Naomi's eyes softened. It was already here. It just needed to be noticed. He looked at her then, the woman who had once arrived as a stranger, carrying only her calm and a quiet conviction that kindness could still rebuild what grief had broken. In her, he saw everything Grace had ever hoped for their family: patience, light, and a love that didn't rush to be seen. "I don't say it enough," he murmured, "but thank you." Naomi reached for his hand. "You say it in all the ways that matter." The porch creaked softly as they sat in silence again, two people wrapped in the kind of stillness that no longer felt empty. The narrator's voice rises now, slow and steady, filled with reflection. The tone of a storyteller closing a circle rather than ending a tale. Once there was a house too quiet for laughter, a father too tired to hope, and 3 small boys who had learned that noise was the only way to be heard. Then, one day, someone stayed. She stayed through the tantrums, through the whispers, through the judgment of a world that mistook calm for weakness. She stayed long enough for love to relearn its language. And somewhere between spilled syrup and sunflowers, between public humiliation and quiet mournings, dignity returned, not as a grand victory, but as a soft, steady truth. That love, when tended, does not disappear. It grows. Inside the house, the sound of small footsteps padded down the hallway. Cal appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, rubbing his eyes. "Mom?" Naomi smiled. "Couldn't sleep?" He shook his head. "I had a dream about Grandma. She said the garden looks nice." Ethan and Naomi exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. A shared recognition that even the unseen still found ways to visit. Naomi opened her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." He climbed into her lap, head resting against her shoulder. She said thank you for keeping the promise. Naomi kissed the top of his head. "We all kept it, didn't we?" He nodded sleepily. "Yeah, all of us." Ethan leaned closer, brushing Cal's hair gently. "Then maybe that's what peace is, when everyone keeps a promise together." The boy's breathing slowed, and within minutes, he was asleep again. Ethan carried him inside, tucking him back under the blanket. Naomi lingered a moment longer on the porch, gazing out at the garden. The lanterns glowed softly, the petals shimmered in moonlight, and the wind whispered through the leaves, the same whisper that had carried them through every trial. "Stay." She smiled, whispering back, "We're still here." The narrator's voice returns one final time, calm and sure, like the sound of a tide reaching shore. Dignity grows where someone chooses to stay. Love is not noise. It's patience that doesn't leave. It's the quiet act of waking up every day and choosing gentleness over pride, forgiveness over fear. And when enough days pass like that, the world stops calling it luck or miracle. It starts calling it home. The faint echo of piano notes fades in, simple, unhurried. Inside, laughter stirs again, small and real, wrapping the story in warmth. And then, as the light fades completely, the narrator speaks one last time, voice filled with gratitude rather than farewell. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. If this story left you a little lighter, or reminded you that compassion still has a place in the world, subscribe, share it with someone who might need it, and keep believing in second chances. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness is the beginning of everything. The final chord of piano lingers, a single resonant note that fades into the sound of wind through the garden and a child's distant laugh, soft and eternal.